This would be good enough. All right. Oh, I should pull up the chat so I can see people talking. Social media. Stream chat. Hey, hey guys, how is the sound? Question mark. Hey Don, visual good, sound good. All right, looks like we are live. Dale, thanks for coming on. I appreciate taking the time to have a conversation with you. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for inviting me on there. My name is Dale. I'm the host of something called Real Seeker Ministries. So it's just sort of a small podcast where I kind of go over Christian apologetics arguments and that sort of thing. I'm really interested in philosophy, so I'm a first year master's student in philosophy um, at the moment at Ryerson University. And I guess just a bit about my faith journey if people want to know about that. So I grew up as a Christian in a Christian home and that sort of thing. About 10 or 11 years ago, I kind of had a crisis of faith. And so I left. I stopped believing in Christianity and that sort of thing. And I kind of went on a search of the evidences for and against various religions, and that kind of applied my own method to studying those, including using Bayes' theorem to kind of assess probability, subjective probability factors that I assigned to each of the evidential factors. And in 2018, I arrived at 53.14% in favor of Christianity. It sounds weird, I know, but that's what I arrived at, and on that basis, I converted to Christianity, and I've been a Christian ever since.
That's interesting. You just wrote out the calculation and then decided based on the calculation that you believed.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. It was, yeah, basically did it on the basis of positive and negative evidences for and against, and whatever it came out to, if it was more probable than not, I was going to place my faith in it and believe in the evidence accordingly.
Huh. That's interesting because the Bayes theorem, all it does is it tells you what you already believe. So assessing the Bayes probability would have you should have already believed before you did that, I would assume.
I don't see that that's the case. It gives you, so in the first place, I should admit, I didn't use Bayes' theorem properly. So I didn't calculate conditional probabilities or anything like that. It was more just a direct subjective probability value for whatever the evidence was that I was assessing. But obviously, I would break that up into parts. I would present my objective reasons, and stuff like that, and then I would assess each factor subjectively. So essentially, I just use Bayes' theorem as a fancy way of getting what is the cumulative total of my own subjective assessments of each factor.
Right. So if it's telling you your own subjective assessments, then it's telling you what you already believe.
Well, no, I mean, so put it this way: when you assess each factor, you kind of okay, you've assigned a value, you've gone through all of the factors that contribute to your overall conclusion, and then Bayes comes in and just tells you you can get an objective cumulative total for each of those factors, as opposed to just jumbling it up inside of your head and making an overall judgment. So I
Well,
didn't,
well,
I
that's
wasn't.
that's the part that's not true. So Bayes doesn't give you an objective total at all, not even close. It's completely subjective. Is the problem of the prior. So all Bayes does is it tells you if you believe X, here is the conclusion Y. But it's only telling you the things that are the result of the things you already believe. It gives you no objective basis whatsoever. It's purely just assessing based on your current beliefs. Here is what should follow. But there's no objective basis to it whatsoever. That's kind of the point of Bayes' theorem. All it does is tell you the conclusion that you should have of the beliefs if you have these beliefs.
For sure, yeah. There's always that Geigo problem. That's what I hear you trying to say, right? Garbage in, garbage out, kind of thing. But I just use Bayes, so that's where it comes down to me defending my subjective probability values and how I got it, presenting my reasons and that sort of thing. But the way I see Bayes, the reason why I wanted to use Bayes to get the overall cumulative total, and that is objective, is I think if you don't do that, you suffer from two GIGO problems. So you have the normal garbage in, garbage out, but you also have great stuff in, garbage out if you don't use Bayes. I didn't have that problem because as long as my inputs were correct, then I'm guaranteed to have the proper total cumulatively. So at least it takes that element of bias out on that level. Does that make sense? Or
Not exactly. So I'm not saying how you're using Bayes as a methodology to establish any kind of truth here. Like how do you use Bayes to differentiate imagination from reality when it can't do that? So Bayesian epistemology is notoriously only useful for things that have an empirical basis. If it doesn't have an empirical basis, you can't use Bayes' theorem for it.
well, that's not true. You can use it for like historical purposes and that sort of thing as well, right? Historians use, like Richard Carrier, for example, has used it to prove Jesus mythicism. I know, I know.
No one accepts that. So in history, no, you can only use like Bayes. The same methodology in history and law apply regardless of which metric you use. Nobody uses Bayes in history. No one cares. No one. Richard Carrier is just weird. No one actually cares. But if you were to use Bayes in history, the same rules would apply that it can only establish things that already have an empirical basis. It could never establish things that don't, which would mean no miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, UFOs. None of those could be established using Bayes in any form of history whatsoever. History just can't do that. No testimony, modern testimony, could not confirm those things. Past testimony definitely can't. That's the consensus in history. So none of those things could be verified using any history, regardless of which metric you use.
Yeah, it's so. First of all, yes, you're 100% right that the majority of historians don't use that. Even my good friend Mike Lacona mocks people that would use that kind of approach in history. But nonetheless, I disagree. I think you could use it, but it does suffer from this issue of okay, well, how are you arriving at your inputs? And obviously, I'm not using probabilities in a frequentist sense or a statistical probabilities. I would have no idea how to go about calculating that. So I'm just using it as sort of a helpful heuristic. I present my reasons on whatever, the cosmological argument for God, whatever value I get at the end of that, or the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection, whatever factors I get into that. And I would just use Bayes as a way to get the cumulative total. That's all I'm doing. I'm not claiming that I use Bayes in arriving at the inputs in any statistical way or anything like that.
Okay. So all right. Then if you are using it in that way, what exactly are these arguments that you think indicate the existence of God?
Sure. So yeah, I think when I was doing my assessment of it, so I think that there are the positive and negative evidences. So on the positive side for me, that played a role in my faith. I like the cosmological argument, specifically the argument from contingency. I'm a big fan of the modal ontological argument. Um, there was other things, so we're not
Okay,
going to go.
let's start with those two. So the contingency argument just says there is a all contingent things have a necessary cause. Like I can just grant that and say that that's not evidence of a God at all. Just a necessary thing could be anything. And so there's no reason to believe that the fact that there is a necessary thing would indicate it has a mind of any kind or it rose Jesus from the dead or anything like that. So it most likely would be better explained by a quantum field or naturalistic pantheism or any of the naturalistic explanations which actually have a empirical basis of some kind rather than a supernatural entity.
Okay. So yeah, and I heard you raise this. So I don't know if I should present the argument. You're kind of going straight for the jugular. You would accept. So premise one of my argument would be the universe exists contingently. It's a contingent existing thing. You seem to be saying check. I'm cool with that. Um, Premise two is that's basically where I present the principle of sufficient reason as a general explanatory principle. Okay, given that we have this cosmic feature, the universe exists contingently, it requires a sufficient explanation of its existence. And then premise three is where I bring in, and that explanation is what I call God one, the God one hypothesis. Um, so your objection here, you were kind of saying that well, anything can be necessary. Well, that's not true in the first place, right? There are some things that are inherently contingent, like things that begin to exist, they can't be necessary, right? Like eternality is an essential component for something to be logically necessary.
Sure, but
Uh,
anything could have the property of eternal. Like the pineapple, a pineapple could have a property of eternal. We just don't know it yet.
well, I don't think so. Given the essence of what a pineapple is, right? It just is something that inherently can be eaten, for example. So,
Nope.
like,
So that's a presumption based on what you presume the definition of necessary entails. Like maybe the necessary being could be eaten. There's no definition. Like necessary is a made up term. Like we could apply whatever properties we want to it. There's no inherent truth to what necessary entails or doesn't entail. So pineapples could in fact be necessary. There could be a necessary pineapple that exists. And it doesn't, the fact that it's eaten isn't a property of a pineapple, so that's not required. Or we could just add it into a property of necessary. Either one would work just fine. So you presupposing that necessary entails or does not entail these things is just kind of your made up definition, and there's no reason to think that would correspond to reality.
so if I'm you said for a second that a pineapple could be eaten, um, and in that sense still be necessary.
Yep.
I don't understand that because it wouldn't be eternal. It would be out of
The
existence
fact that it
at
could be
that
eaten
point.
doesn't make it not eternal. So, like, there could be a past eternal pineapple that is the necessary thing, and you could still eat it, but it could still have created the universe. So it could still be necessary in that it was the foundation of reality and created everything, and then you could eat it in the future, and that would be fine. So it doesn't need to be future eternal. It could be past eternal. It could be the thing that created everything, and you could still potentially eat it. Like, I mean, like, what's it? The wafer thingy, the communion. You can eat
Oh,
Jesus.
well, I'm not a Catholic, but hypothetically, yes. Okay, so I would just argue that I think that what you just said is wrong. Because how do we define what does it mean for something to be necessary? It means that it's impossible for it not to exist, or if it's a proposition for it not to be true or something. It's got to be. We're kind of getting into the
Oh,
ontological
right, right.
argument.
So I would reject that completely. You don't need a necessary thing that couldn't be otherwise. That's false. You just need something to create the contingent universe. So it could stop existing. That's fine. You can have, I think it's called panentheism, where God created the universe out of himself and killed himself in the process. That's perfectly possible. There's no logical contradiction there. So you can have a necessary being that exists past eternally or in the outside of time in the past direction, but can destroy himself in the future direction and be perfectly fine. There's no inconsistency there.
Gotcha. So yeah, this is where we would need to get in. So with cosmological arguments, there are five fundamental objections. I kind of wanted to just give this little quick spiel, but yeah, there are five objections. So number one, you can deny what the cosmic feature is. You can deny that the universe exists contingently or something. In my case, number two, you can give the Glendower problem, which is what you deny that it need. Okay, the universe exists, whatever, but it doesn't need an explanation or a cause, whatever you're arguing for, and that's where you give an explanatory principle or a causal principle to defeat that as that. And then there's the taxi cab fallacy, the infinite regress problem, and then what you're talking about, the gap problem. And this is where I think most work. So the gap problem is okay, even if I accept that the universe has a cause or needs an explanation or something, and you would ground that in the necessity of the quantum fields or whatever you want to say. How do you get from there to God? Like all the attributes, that doesn't prove he's omnipotent or good or something like that. And am I off base or?
Well, one, past infinite isn't actually a problem at all. There's no logical contradictions with the past infinite whatsoever. Secondly, yeah, my argument is that we can have a necessary thing which just isn't God. It's just there's no definitive definition of what a necessary thing is. You just have an opinion of what you think a necessary thing is. I can present an alternative definition which is equally or more likely to be the correct definition. And so even if we grant the cosmological argument, it would be more evidence of my position of naturalistic pantheism or a quantum field than it would of a god of any kind.
Okay, so with the quantum fields, then I would just argue. I would come back and say, well, I don't think that those are necessary in any sense of the word because what are quantum fields, right? Yeah, what are quantum fields in your view?
Not sure what you mean. It's a field. Quantum fields are a field. What?
Okay, okay. Can can they exist independently of subatomic particles or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. So I would disagree with you on that. So I take what's called a causal dispositions theory of the laws of nature or fields and that sort of thing. They um, basically are just descriptions, mathematical descriptions of uh, physical things that
Sure.
exist. Okay, so you would agree with that.
Yep.
Okay, so then using modal logic, we can conceive of a possible world where those particles don't exist
I can
altogether.
conceive of a world where God doesn't exist altogether. So that would also disprove your God.
Well, I would need to come back on that, but sorry, you would admit then that in the first place, particle you can conceive of worlds without those particles or with different particles or something.
Sure.
You're saying yes.
Sure. And I can
Okay,
conceive of different worlds with different gods and no God.
right, but okay, so would you admit then that that means these things are not necessary? And yes, by implication, if it's true what you say about God, the same would be true of him. But with the particles, are you
No,
saying
so my definition of necessary doesn't entail the fact that you can't imagine it otherwise. Like that's just completely made up. There's no reason to think that is a requirement in any kind of necessary thing.
well, you have modal evaluating faculties. You can conceive of possible worlds, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not necessary. So a necessary thing could have been otherwise and still be the necessary thing. So there's no requirement of the necessary thing that it couldn't be otherwise. It's not, it's just a made up definition. There's no truth to that definition. There's no reason to think that definition is true. Completely incoherent.
Completely incoherent to say that necessary is something that exists and or is true in every single possible world.
Yes, that's completely incoherent. So it's incoherent to say that there is a thing that we can't imagine to be otherwise, because the whole point of our imagination is to imagine things that are not the case in a different way it could be. So saying that we could imagine something a different way is not evidence that it has some kind of real property. You're conflating imaginary properties, imaginary components to what we think, and saying that our imagination and somehow entails some property related to the thing itself, which is false. Like, no, our ability to like we can literally imagine anything to be otherwise, other than like, well, you can literally imagine anything to be otherwise. So there is no such thing as a thing that cannot be imagined to be otherwise.
What about numbers? Can you
Yep.
imagine 1 + 1 not equaling 2 in the same
Yep.
sense, common sense
Yep.
mathematics?
There are
Okay.
all kinds of contradictory logics and contradictory maths that we can imagine being the case.
But that's in a different like you're talking about something like fuzzy logic or different base maths or something like
Yeah, like
that.
we can imagine there's a universe where 2 + 2 = 5. Poof, done.
So I can't, and I would just, in the same sense as the ordinary audience members are talking about 2 + 2 will necessarily equals 4. It's logically impossible for it to equal that, and I think that is proven through our modal evaluating faculty. So I kind of equate, if we can imagine it, then it's conceivable. Now
I can conceive of a universe where 2 + 2 = 5. I just did.
okay, I don't believe you, but there's nothing I can say to kind of prove you wrong about
Okay,
that.
well, everybody can imagine a universe without the Christian God. That's easy. There's no logical contradiction there. So if you want to just go from that one,
Mhm. Yeah, sure. So that's the second part of your objection. So I would have to say, well, no, you can't really conceive of a world without the Christian God because I think he's necessary and that sort of thing.
so
But
I can't. I literally, you're saying it's impossible to imagine a world that doesn't entail the Christian God. Like, really?
yeah, yes, because once you understand the definition of him as a maximal great being, this is again kind of pushing it into the ontological argument. That entails that he exists in every possible world. That's part of his inherent definition.
Well, right. The fact that you make up a definition and you think that definition is true doesn't mean that I cannot imagine a definition where it's not true. So if you like, I define a unicorn as a unicorn that exists 1 foot in front of me. There is no unicorn 1 foot in front of me. It does not exist. So I can imagine a world where that definition fails. So you can say that a maximally great being is a being that exists in all possible worlds. I can say here's a possible world where it doesn't exist. Therefore, it's false. So it is possible to have a world in which there is no maximally great being because your definition is just false.
Yeah, yeah, you can say that. It wouldn't. So in the first place, try to distinguish between an ontological claim versus just a mere epistemological claim, right? So may, maybe for the sake of the audience, I don't know what's in your head. You don't know what's in my head. If we truly have knowledge in this respect, when we're saying I can conceive of this or that, so that's why I was trying to
What?
appeal to you if you shared these modal intuitions, and since you don't, it kind of shows that the appealing to that wouldn't work with you. I would need to argue elsewise based on other arguments to.
Well, it's more serious than that. Like you're claiming that it's impossible to imagine a world without the Christian God. The vast majority of humans who have ever existed all imagine a world without the Christian God. So it's weird to think that people can't imagine a world without the Christian God. That just seems like begging the question. That looks like if I said you can't imagine a world without the spaghetti monster. So what is your methodology for trying to establish that it's impossible to imagine a world without the Christian God? Like it seems completely possible just to imagine a world with nothing in it. There's just a world of nothing, or a world with just one particle, or a world with just a quantum field, or a world with just unicorns, like, or a world with a Hindu god. Like, it seems very weird to say that in all of those examples entails the Christian God when it clearly does not.
Yeah, so it comes down to the fact. So in the first place, I would just say make sure that you're clear about the difference between conceivability and just mere epistemic imaginability. Like you seem to be saying, for all these people are ignorant that the Christian God is true. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, right? Or vice.
Wait, wait,
Fine, I'm
wait.
ignorant that Allah is real.
So explain that again. There's a difference between conceivability and epistemic imaginability. Like those are, if you can conceive of a world, that's literally just you imagining it. Those are synonymous.
Well, some philosophers try to highlight the difference with things like temporal paradoxes. They can say, well, we can imagine, for all we know, given our limited understanding, I can imagine a temporal paradox taking place, but that's nonetheless, ontologically speaking, impossible. It's inconceivable. And they'll try, you disagree with that?
Well, it depends what you mean. Like, it's completely irrelevant to any of the things I said. But sure, like you can make up paradoxes and stuff and show that one of the imaginary worlds has a contradiction to it. That's fine. It's still an imaginary world. But even so, like there is no contradiction in quantum field world, unicorns world, Hindu world. Like those don't entail contradictions. There's no logical contradiction in any of those.
Yeah, so this is what I was trying to say. This try to get to this, right. There's a difference between strict logically possible worlds and broad or logically possible worlds, or metaphysical logically possible worlds. you, you know
Well,
you
I don't see the relevance to anything that you're saying. So, like, you say it is impossible to imagine a world without God. That seems obviously false. That seems like as false as saying 2 + 2 = 5. Like, no, I can prove that false in like 3 seconds. Just did it. So how do you come to that conclusion? Because I'm not understanding what your justification is there, since it seems
okay,
like
so
it's clearly false.
yeah, so on this argument, on this aspect of trying to prove my argument, which failed with you, and there's nothing I can do against this because it's my modal evaluating faculties provide me with a warranted true belief that 2 + 2 = 4 in every single possible world. I don't care what you say. You can imagine. I think that you're deluded, not as an insult, but
Right,
I'm
right.
just
So
saying
I'm
from
asking, what makes your belief a warranted true belief that the Christian God is the only thing imaginable? Because that's like if I said it's a warranted true belief that it's impossible to imagine a pink elephant. Like, no, that seems obviously false. Like lots of people can imagine a pink elephant. It's a rather common concept in imagination. So it would be an unwarranted belief that people cannot imagine a pink elephant. So it seems in your case that it's an unwarranted belief to believe that you can't imagine a world without Christianity. So I'm asking, how did you come to the conclusion that it is a warranted belief for you that it is impossible to imagine a world without the Christian God?
okay. For yeah, and one thing just to clarify, so there's nothing contradict. There is a possible world with pink elephants in it. That seems conceivable to me. That's not a problem. Unless you're saying there's only a pink elephant in it or something. There's no. You're trying to say there's no God in this world or something. How do
Well,
I
I'm
arrive?
saying those are equivalent statements. So saying there is a conceivable universe with a pink elephant and no God, or there is a conceivable universe with a pink elephant and there is a conceivable universe with no God, are both equally imaginable. And you're saying there's a difference there, and I want to know what the difference is. Why is it justified to believe that it's possible to believe in a pink elephant, while it's not justified to believe it's possible to believe in a world without a God, Christian God?
It's yeah. So yeah, for me on this front, it comes down to the fact that I my modal evaluating faculties are reliably producing this properly basic belief with respect to certain propositions. This is my reason for believing. I know that's not going to convince you at this point, and that sort of thing. So, what? How would I get to prove that? I guess I would appeal to a modal ontological argument, which we're not there yet. We're still supposedly at the cosmological argument, but yeah, I think that established that there is this maximally great necessary being. So if I were to try to convince you, I would maybe appeal to an argument like that rather than just appealing to your own modal evaluating faculties. If that
Well, so I'm making a more general claim here. I'm saying the vast majority of humans say you're wrong, and they're doing the thing that you say is impossible right now. And so it seems very unjustified to think that they're all wrong just because of some kind of conceptual intuition that you have.
Well, I would disagree with that because people can be mistaken when they hastily claim, "Oh, I can just imagine this," as sort of a retort. It takes effort to actually figure out, are you actually warranted in conceiving this possibility? So, for example, David Hume. This is related to the cosmological argument. He gave a modal imagination argument against the principle of sufficient reason. He said, look, I can imagine an ice cream cone just popping out of existence out of nothing. Therefore, the PSR is wrong. Haha. That's kind of what you're saying. And I would appeal to my own modal saying, no, I know it's necessarily true. What I would say to Hume in this case is that Hume is not being careful. I don't think he is imagining what he claims to conceive of an ice cream cone popping into existence unexplained out of nothing. He's actually imagining it popping into existence from something, from an already existent world. There's a room with air in it and stuff like that, and he's mistaken. He's thinking it's coming out of nothing when really he's just picturing it, unbeknownst to him, coming out of something else, perhaps. So that's what I mean. You have to be careful, like, to make
I
sure that
don't I don't see how this relates to the argument here. So people believe in different gods, different origin stories, different religions. Scientists believe it's all material, natural. Like all of these things are logically possible worlds. All of them are imaginable. All of them are imagined by many people. None of them entail a god. Your argument seems defeated.
yeah, but it's not imaginable. Like
It's
they're
not
not
it's not
good.
imaginable. Naturalism isn't imaginable.
No, it's not. It's not conceivable. If you stop and think about it, I think what these
Okay, so
people,
that's the part I'm looking for. Like, why do you think it's not conceivable? I seem to be conceiving it pretty well. How is it not conceivable?
are, well, I think what I would say against you is that you're conceiving of just the natural world, but that isn't necessarily the natural world plus God doesn't exist. So I think what you're imagining is, let me just imagine the universe and that's it. And you're mistaking that for saying you're affirming you can imagine just the natural universe and no God as well. So that's what I think the mistake that you're making in the same way that Hume made that when he
I don't understand. So, like, you're imagining a world with a god and not Vishnu.
sure.
Okay, and I'm imagining a naturalistic world without Jesus. What's the difference?
It's without so in the first place I am positively imagining God on my end, right?
Right. So
I'm
I'm positively imagining naturalism. You're positively imagining God. I'm negatively imagining the Christian God. You're negatively imagining Vishnu.
I don't know if I am negative. I've never used my modal evaluating faculties to conceive of the world without Vishnu. Like I've never focused on that or thought about that thing.
Okay,
Definitely
I
nature.
could say the same thing about God. So God isn't even a consideration in my worldview. It's just naturalism, and you just have God. I just have naturalism.
So there you go. Great. That you just confirmed that I was right in my assessment of why I think you're going wrong. You're just focused on one thing. You're saying, well,
So are
this.
you. So I'm trying to find a dissymmetry here. So I'm mirroring your worldview. This isn't actually my worldview or what I actually believe. I'm just taking what you are saying and mirroring it back at you, and just replacing the noun. So mine is naturalism, so it doesn't have a consciousness or anything. That's the part I'm not
Oh,
mirroring. And
okay.
so you believe in a God that has consciousness. I believe in a naturalistic world with no consciousness, and that is my fundamental thingy, and you have a fundamental thingy. So where is the disparity here in the imaginary world scenario?
Okay. So yeah. So we keep going over the same thing. So would you say? Let me ask you this: would you say that you are conceiving of a natural of just the natural world, or you're conceiving of naturalism, which entails there is no supernatural, no God, or something like that? Like there's additional
I'm just conceiving of a
elements.
necessary natural thing. That's it.
Okay. Okay. So you're conceiving of a necessary natural thing. So I guess that's where I would just appeal to your modal evaluating faculties, you and say that you yourself have admitted that you can conceive of worlds where this natural thing does not exist, and this is
Yep, and I
where.
can conceive of worlds where God does not exist. So there's no difference there.
But there's a difference because I dispute that. I'm different than you, but I'm using what you're giving me, principle of enemy attestation. You're saying you personally can.
Right, right, but you'd have to give a reason to think that it is the case that there is some difference between these two. Why is one imaginable and one not imaginable? Whereas it seems they are equally imaginable to all rational human beings. I can imagine one without a God, and I can imagine one with a God. I can imagine different properties of a God, and I can imagine different properties of nature. They are all exactly equally the same. So you would have to provide some kind of justification to say they're not the same, and you haven't done that. That's what we're asking for here. We're asking like, what is your justification that God can't be imagined to be differently, just like anything else can?
Yeah, it's so this is where I would get into the argument from addressing the gap problem, I guess, to deal with someone like you. I would argue we're still on the cosmological argument. Is that correct at this point?
I would assume so. I mean, I think you've kind of moved into the ontological argument. So it's like you're saying the cosmological argument only works if the ontological argument works, and if the ontological argument doesn't work, well, then it doesn't do anything.
Well, okay. So with the cosmological argument, when we address the gap problem,
What is the
there
gap problem?
the gap problem is how do you. Okay, so we can prove. Let's pretend it succeeds, and we can prove there's a necessary cause. You seem happy to do that. You
Sure.
say, well, that's nature. I say that's God or whatever. Um, Additionally, though, I think that there are arguments, supplemental arguments that can establish other attributes of God.
Okay, so that's fine. But just stick with that. So without any of the supplemental arguments, the kalam or the cosmological on its own tells you nothing about the qualities of a god.
Exactly, yeah. It requires supplemental, like there are implications from it,
Okay,
right?
okay, so that's great. So if we're just looking at the cosmological, it works equally as well for naturalism as it does theism, and you need some other argument that isn't the kalam or cosmological, and for that to be evidence first before the cosmological does anything. So it looks like the cosmological on its own is nothing. It's zero evidence, one way or the other. You need this other thing first for it to actually be evidence.
The only thing I would dispute with you there is it doesn't work for naturalism because how are we defining the universe? It's all of space and time and its contents. So that includes your quantum vacuum states as the initial
No, so
state.
so those are outside of space time. So in physics, there are things outside of space time. Space time is an emergent of some other fundamental things. The universe is just our observable universe, and everybody in physics, the consensus is that there is more stuff beyond our universe.
A quantum, but it's including the quantum vacuum state, which is a physical state, and I would argue
What?
it is within time as well. I have a different view of time
Well,
than you.
that you
You
can
say it
have
does,
you can have your own subjective view of time. It just disagrees with physics. So physics says time is a thing in our universe. There could be other things outside of our universe that are outside of time. Space time is literally emergent, so there are literally things outside of time. Your conception of time doesn't make a difference here. What we're asking is does the cosmological argument indicate theism over naturalism? The answer is no, as far as I can tell, because it could equally be the case that there is natural things outside of time as non-natural things. supernatural things.
Okay, and by space you mean classical space-time, is that correct?
I
Or
mean, the only kind supported by physics.
the only kind supported by physics is what? So the initial, what sort of model are you going for? I'm not sort of understanding. Like, do you go an eternal inflation model or quantum gravity type model? Like,
Those are theories of quantum mechanics. Those aren't theories of the fundamental nature of reality.
no, they're theory. They're models. They're not theories. They're
So
models of
inflation is a theory. Eternal inflation is a theory that the stuff in space time is continuing to expand continuously. It doesn't tell us anything about the fundamental nature of reality. Uh, Quantum gravity again is just trying to bridge gravity and quantum mechanics. It has nothing to do with the fundamental nature of reality. Neither of those have anything to do with the fundamental nature of reality. That's not; those are not answering those questions. So I'm saying there is a fundamental nature to reality, the necessary thing, which is a natural, non-conscious thing. You're saying it's a conscious thing. The cosmological argument provides no justification to support one over the other so far in what you've presented.
okay. So far, yeah. And let me. Is it okay if I just say something correct a little bit on what you said about the models or something? Because it doesn't address your point about the fundamental cause or explanation, but just understand we have modern scientific evidence and singularity theorems, right? So for example, the
There's
Hawking
no such
singularity.
there's no singularity. The singularity hypothesis was debunked by Hawking a long time ago. Singularity is not a thing anymore.
It's
But these are all just very specific theories in physics which have nothing to do with the topic at hand. Like that's like saying, there's a proton theory. Yes, the protons exist. Okay, but it's not. We're not talking about protons. We're talking about the fundamental nature of reality. So talking about specific things that exist in physics isn't talking about the fundamental nature of reality. Those are two separate things.
Well, yes, but I wanted to figure out from you because allegedly, so here's one model to explain why I think I wanted to understand your position. I'm not trying to be difficult or anything, but so for example, there are five exceptions to the singularity theorems, and with the VG singularity theorem, there are four exceptions, and by appealing to these, you can posit a past eternal universe. So,
Well,
for
there's
example,
not four exceptions. That's not how it works. The BGV theorem has assumptions, and if you dismiss the assumptions, then you can dismiss the theorem. So this is again has nothing to do with anything I said. It has nothing to do with the topic. The topic is can there be an answer to the contingency argument, which is not a mine? The answer is yes. And no, I don't need to reference anything in physics. Nothing in physics matter. The entire field of physics is irrelevant here. So I don't know why you're bringing that up. So again, the
let
contingency
me,
argument says there's a necessary thing. I say there's a necessary thing with no mind. You said there's one with a mind, and we're saying
yeah,
why should we prefer one over the other? Physics doesn't matter here. Physics is completely irrelevant.
okay, well, I wish I could have established my point, but yeah, it's your show, so I will move on if you feel I'm kind of avoiding that. But that would have helped me to understand exactly what you mean by this fundamental state that you're positing, but I have just no details. So let me
Well,
try
the
to
details
establish.
again, details don't matter either. Like it doesn't need to be a specific hypothesis. I can just say there is a necessary thing which doesn't have in mind. Period. Full stop. That's it.
Okay, so let me try and establish the agency or the personhood of this fundamental state, as you call it. Then, so there are various arguments that philosophers have attached to the cosmological argument based on the implications of the argument itself, right? So one argument would be the one that Richard Swinburne gives. He says, look, there are two different types of explanations that we know about. You can't deny it. They work. There's scientific explanations, rely on event to event causation type deal. And then there are personal explanations or agent causation.
Well, before we get into that, I just want to say so just going off of the cosmological argument, there has to be a necessary thing. This tells us nothing about the necessary thing. You need this other argument to work. And if it doesn't work, well, then there's no reason to think the necessary thing isn't a natural thing versus a supernatural thing. So the cosmological argument on its own, without these other arguments that you're presenting, doesn't tell you anything. It's zero evidence.
Well, it tells you that whatever the necessary cause was, it's spaceless. You've agreed to that. It's timeless. You've agreed to that, right? Because you say that your state is outside of space and time as well, right?
Those aren't in the cosmological argument, but we can
But
grant them for the sake of the argument. But no, it doesn't indicate that either. Like it just means it's outside of the physical known space times. It could be a different timed thing for sure. It could be a thing in a different space or a thing in a different time. That would be perfectly fine. There's no logical contradiction there either. So it doesn't need to be. It only needs to be outside of the space time in our universe. It doesn't need to be outside of all space or all time.
okay, so it's spaceless and timeless for you, at least in the sense that it's not the temporal dimension that we're privy to.
Right.
It would have
Right.
to be in a hyper time
Right,
state.
because our universe had a beginning, and space and time in our universe had a beginning. So whatever created that has to be outside of our space and time. But it could be a different kind of space and time. That's perfectly fine. All we know is that it has to be outside of the space and time that was created in our universe.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, so yeah, I was just going to say that there are these two types of explanations. Personal.
Wait. So again, my question was that without these other arguments you're presenting, the kalam on its own or the cosmological argument on its own is zero evidence for God. It doesn't tell you anything one way or the other. It doesn't count as evidence. You have to have these other arguments that work first for it to count.
Yeah, I think that that's fair enough. Like
Okay.
there are certain things like it's spaceless and timeless in a certain sense. That comes directly out of the argument. But you're absolutely right. That doesn't get you personhood. That requires additional
Okay.
argument. Okay. So yeah, I'll throw out the ones that William Lane Craig gives then and see what you make of those for the agency or personhood. So in the first place, if one argument is if we had an eternal universe with the natural state where they had the necessary and sufficient conditions always being present, it would be impossible for the universe as we know it with our in our space time and that sort of thing to just come into existence 13.82 billion years ago, because if the necessary and sufficient conditions are present, that necessarily entails the effect and would cause it. So the only way out of that, and this is where the agency comes in, according to Dr. William Lane Craig, is well, the only way to avoid that, to have the necessary and sufficient conditions present, but not have the effect until it is through libertarian free will. And this, what type of beings or things have libertarian free will? Only agents, only persons have that. So that's one argument that you can.
So I wasn't following there. The so the universe exists. Poof. We needed something to create it, and it could have been created by a quantum field just fine. Randomness, if randomness is a thing, it could have been created by randomness. If it was determined, it could have been determined just fine. Where is the problem here?
So you're saying in your fundamental state, the necessary and sufficient conditions are present for all eternity in this hypertime thing, right?
There's a necessary being, and the necessary being can create our universe, right?
Yeah, that's the causal
So
power.
God is the necessary and sufficient condition, and it exists. And in mine, a natural quantum field is the necessary and sufficient thing, and it can create the universe, and it exists outside of space time.
Yes, but non-personal
Yes.
agents without free will, they
Yep.
can't invoke libertarian. They don't have a dual ability, right? If the
Right. Obviously, they don't have so there's no free will in this, but there's no need. So it could be determined by its own nature to do something, just like God is determined by His own nature, or it could be random. There could be a randomness thing that literally exists in reality that could cause it. Either of those could explain the creation of the universe just fine.
but well, okay, so I would disagree personally that God's nature is determined, personally, but yeah, that's beside the point. He's a libertarian, free will agent, I would argue. But
Can God choose His nature?
can God choose his nature? No, I don't think he can.
So
There's
that
no
means it's determined.
feasible. Well, there's no. Well, I'll put it this way: there's no feasible world where he can change his nature or has the power to click his thumbs and change his nature.
What
But
does the word determined mean?
what does the word determined mean? It means that you're externally determined through a prior chain of causal.
No, it just means you can't change it. It just means it's unable to be changed. No prior anything. I don't care about prior stuff. It can't be changed. God can't change it. It's determined.
Yeah, well, God can change it then. How about that? It's strictly logically possible. There's no logical contradiction in supposing God has the power to change his nature. That doesn't mean it's feasible.
So if God is making decisions, and God is making decisions like his choiceness is based on his nature, can he make a decision like about his nature before he had a nature to make the decision?
Well, I mean, so in the first place, there are certain requirements in order for someone to make a free will choice. That doesn't mean that they're determining factors. You have to have a intelligence, right? You have to have a nature, that sort of thing. You have to be a person in order to have libertarian free will. Those are necessary components, but their presence don't mean that they're sufficient to determine one's choice, right? That's the whole point of
Right.
having.
So the question is could God choose to not have those things and still have choices? The answer would be no, right? He needs those things to have choices in the first place.
Oh, for sure, yeah, yeah.
So parts of his nature are determined in his choice. Like his ability to have choices is determined by his nature, and he couldn't choose to not have those things because that would lead to a contradiction.
His nature doesn't determine it. The words I would use, they impress upon, they influence his decisions, but they don't determine them.
Can God choose his own nature?
It's strictly logically possible, yeah.
So he could get rid of his intelligence and still have a choice?
No,
So he can't choose his own nature. There are things about his nature he cannot choose, he cannot change that are determined.
Yes, there are certain necessary components that he can't choose to get rid of and still have free will. Yes.
Right. So he has a determined nature, and so does mine, and they can both cause stuff, like the universe or whatever.
No, it's. What are you saying? He's determined to have the nature or intelligence before he.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So he has some property. He's determined to have this property. He can't choose this property. This property is inherently in the godness. Mine also has inherent properties.
Yeah, but the choice. So let's focus on what Dr. Tamar Shapiro calls.
Well, wait, so I'm saying that the inherent properties can entail something like a quantum field or quantum randomness or a way to create the universe. Like any of these can be entailed properties instead of intelligence. You don't need intelligence to be your entailed property, and so you can have something to create the universe without intelligence just fine. Like you just any determined property to do that would be fine. Just pick your property, randomness, quantum field, whatever, and they could all create the universe without intelligence or choice.
Yeah. So I would just I would disagree with that. Like when we're focusing on the moment of drama, it's the nature of the choice. It doesn't matter what factors go into that or not, right? If it's his nature, intelligence, yes, those are necessary factors. They're not determining factors. They're just influences, right?
Well, again, so I'm saying there is no choice in mind. So you have a choice model, which isn't even possible, but I don't want to go into that yet. I have a non-choice model. You have some properties inherent in the God's nature that cause him to have this choice thingy. I have some properties in my quantum field which have the properties to create the universe with no choice, just fine.
Yes.
So the question here is like, why do we need choice? Because it seems like you can create the universe with no choice just fine.
Yes, absolutely. They have the ability, the causal thing, but here's where the problem comes in favor of this is why it's an argument for the agency, for my option, because if your option was true, it's all determined without agency, no intelligence, no natures, blah blah blah. Well, they have natures, but they're not persons, so there isn't anything that would allow them the ability to refrain from creating. The universe should be eternal. The universe as we see it, as long as those necessary determining factors, as you call them, are present, the universe has to exist eternally, but it's only 13 billion years old. So
no, so there you have a nature, like as I said, randomness or whatever, like it can create things at different points, like a quantum particle can decay at random times just fine, even though there's infinitely many possible places it can decay. It decays at this point in time. That's just fine. So quantum randomness can solve that easily, or any of the other properties can solve that easily. You could say it's determined to create the universe at time x and not time y. That would be perfectly fine too. So you don't need a choice here at all. You can just say it's determined to create the universe at time x and not time y, or it's random and it randomly created it at time x and not time y. Either of those can explain that just fine. Either of those can answer the question, why is it not eternal? Because it was determined to create it at time x.
Okay, so that just doesn't make sense then. If the necessary and sufficient conditions are present in the antecedent, the consequent must come about. It's impossible for it not to come about. So to kind of use an analogy, it's like saying, well, we have water and we have
so it's determined to come about at time x and not before time x. That could be a determined thing. So so the antecedent and necessary conditions are there, and they're going to make it happen at time x and not before time x.
But there's nothing in that says that it would only. There's nothing. What is it about a quantum field? There's nothing that we know from modern science about a quantum field that says.
Well, that's just quantum fields are an example here. It doesn't matter. I can just say anything could exist in the nature of the necessary thing that could make it determined to do whatever action at time x and not before time x. That would be perfectly fine. There's no logical contradiction there. There's other ways to do it, like it could be random. Randomness, if randomness is an inherent thing in the property of the necessary thing, then it could just do it randomly at time x instead of time y, and that would also be logically coherent. So either of those things, either determined or randomness, can both account for why the universe isn't past eternal.
Yeah, so basically what you would be having to argue is that the necessary and sufficient conditions are not present for all eternity.
No, the necessary and sufficient conditions are present for all eternity, and in those conditions entails a time frame. It says, I'm going to do this at time X, either randomly or determined, and so it is fixed within those necessary and sufficient conditions that the universe will only occur at this time.
Yeah, that's not the way it works. I get what you're.
Where is the problem here? So this is perfectly logically coherent. There's no logical contradiction here. So the fact, all I can see is that you think you have your own preferred definition of what this means, which just isn't required by reality. Reality does not accept your definition. So where is the contradiction here?
Well, actually, all the experts, every scientist in the world accepts my definition on this that I'm aware of. So
so again, all of the experts are going to be on my side of this. Everybody in physics rejects all of the theistic garbage. Like they all think, yes, like they all think past eternal universes are the consensus. So no one agrees with the theistic definitions here. But so what is it that you think is impossible for either a determined necessary thing or a random necessary thing that makes it impossible for it to create something at time X and not time Y?
Okay, so with the determined for time X, that is saying that perhaps there's necessary but insufficient conditions that are present. Otherwise, the effect would necessarily come about. This is why logic works the way. This is why we have modus tollens reasoning or modus ponens, right? Where we have an if-then syllogism. If this antecedent is the case, then necessarily the consequence will come about.
Sure. If you want to define sufficient that way, that's fine. I don't care. That's fine. I'm fine with that. So there's a necessary thing that says it's going to create it once the sufficient condition of time X has achieved. That's fine. There's no logical contradiction there. That's totally okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. So okay, cool. So you're good with saying that? Yeah, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, that's all this definition stuff. That's irrelevant. So all those word games don't matter here. It's still logically possible to have a necessary thing that creates the universe at time X. No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're kind of going off on tangent.
Well, no. So the argument is still you need a necessary thing, and it is outside of space-time, but created the universe 13.8 billion years ago. Can that be done without a mind? Yes, it can be done in a deterministic way, and it can be done in a random way. Neither of those entail a logical contradiction. So why would that indicate a mind?
Gotcha. Yeah, because the universe would be eternal, and
no, I just proved that false. So it can create it at time X, 13.8 billion years ago, both in a determined sense and in a random sense with no mind, and it is not eternal in either of the models I presented. That would be false.
According to you, but
well, either of the models I just presented. So you'd have to show that the models I presented entail a contradiction or something.
not a contradiction, but it's fault. Like I said, for example, your randomness thing. Every quantum physicist in the world agrees with me that that's not true because they do posit things like an asymptotically static model, for example, where it's these
Nope.
conditions are present, but no.
Nope. The consensus is that randomness is itself a fundamental nature of the universe. There is the fundamental attitudes in quantum physics poll that literally says this. They ask, is randomness a result of hidden variables or whatever, or is it a fundamental part of the universe? The consensus is it's a fundamental part of the universe. Randomness itself is a real thing. That is the consensus in physics.
I'm not denying randomness. I'm saying that if randomness is the cause that you're appealing to in this second aspect that you're trying to get out of, so there is that, right? Quantum physicists know about this BKL chaos problem, and they've written peer-reviewed scientific papers saying that this is a reason against the truth of these models because that would prove that the universe couldn't just be 13.82 billion years old. It would have to be caused eternally in the past. So we would be seeing the expanding universe
No,
eternally.
no, that doesn't follow at all. So there is a necessary thing that also has randomness in it, and the randomness in the necessary thing caused the universe to be created 13.8 billion years ago. So
Gotcha.
it's like in the multiverse theory, our universe was created 13.8 billion years ago. Just fine. There's other stuff that's past eternal, and that's fine too. But our universe was created 13.8 billion years ago in the multiverse with randomness.
Okay, I'll let you have the last word then. I guess it's your show. So, all right.
I mean, I'm still because you keep making these assertions that it can't be determined and it can't be random. It must be a mind, but there's nothing that you've presented to support that. Like yeah, it can be determined. There could be a determined nature of the necessary thing without a mind, and it can do it at one time and not another time, perfectly logically coherent. Or it can be random to do it at one time and another time, perfectly logically coherent. Free will isn't logically coherent, so either of those, determined or random, would both be better explanations than free will. So your argument seems to work against you here. Like determined or random are the better explanations. Free will is incoherent. There's nothing, no decision could be made that wasn't determined by prior reasons or random anyway. Its choice isn't the third option. The choice is either going to be determined or random. And there's no evidence of free will. Free will has been debunked in every single scientific field. And the consensus is it doesn't exist in every single scientific field. The consensus is that randomness does exist. So if we're going to say what explains the origin of the universe, randomness, which we know exists, is always going to be a better explanation than free will, which we know doesn't exist. Or the consensus is randomness exists, free will doesn't exist, it's a better explanation. Like what caused the footprint in the snow? Horses. Horses we know exist, so it's a better explanation than unicorns. And you seem to be saying, no, it's the unicorn.
Well, yeah. All I can say is I've done the work in terms of researching what the scientists have done. I did put up a cosmological argument, and this randomness thing is proves that the universe probably can't be eternal in the past. It's called
How?
because the if you had these necessary and sufficient conditions, again, you don't want to specify which model you go for, so I can't be specific. But let's say there's some state of the universe that has the necessary and sufficient conditions to cause our universe to expand, right? Those are present at that time for all eternity, right? So there is no, well, it's
Well, no, no.
determined.
Everything in the Big Bang didn't exist until the Big Bang started. So we can say that all of those things were created at a particular time, essentially. So the singularity, if you want to go with that model, didn't exist until the necessary thing literally created it. It wasn't always there. There was the necessary thing, and the necessary thing exists, and then it creates our
Yes.
universe and everything in it.
Yeah. So this would be, I know this isn't your model, but just can I mention one just to give an example? I mentioned this asymptotically static model, right? So for all of eternity, there's this static state where there's quantum fluctuations going on for all eternity and stuff like that. And then 13.82 billion years ago, something happened and it broke out, and we see that, the Big Bang, whatever you want to say. I don't believe in a singularity either, but at least in terms of a point. Um, that's what they say. So there's this static state, and these fluctuations create what are called BKL chaos problem. This is in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, and scientists have said it would be impossible for this model, or probably impossible for this model physically to be eternal in the past. So that's an illustration of my general
That's
argument.
irrelevant. So the fact that a particular model in physics couldn't be eternal in the past is irrelevant to randomness. This does not mean all randomness can't be. This is that particular model and only that particular model. The vast majority, the consensus in physics is that there is a past eternal universe with randomness. Though that is the consensus in every single branch of physics. So the fact that you want to cherry pick this model, it doesn't extend to literally any other model. It's that model. Like, okay, I don't care about that model. There is no logical contradiction with a past eternal infinite, and there's no logical contradiction with randomness. So I can just say there's a necessary thing with randomness, and there's still no logical contradiction. So nothing you said has refuted that. You just said that this particular model can't be past eternal. Like, okay, I don't care about that model. That does not extend to all randomness.
Okay, so I'll just give this one last response, and I promise you'll get the last word. Whatever,
Well,
that's
I don't
fine.
want the last word. I want you to actually answer the question. You asserting that this model can't do it is irrelevant.
So
Everybody in physics grants that, yeah, there can be randomness. Yeah, there could be a necessary thing. It could be random. This is irrelevant. None of the models in physics matter. Like, everybody admits all of the models in physics are wrong. We don't know what the fundamental nature of reality is. So bringing up any model in physics here is irrelevant. They don't tell us anything.
so it's not irrelevant. It's analogous because the problem is inherently to do with randomness and
No, it's
it's
not. So that's false. So again, the consensus in physics is both past eternal and randomness. Those both exist. Any particular model you bring up is irrelevant here. It doesn't make a difference.
yes, you're right that the majority of scientists go for an eternal model of some sort, but nonetheless, they all recognize in one way or another this randomness problem at the quantum
No,
level.
that's false. So
And
again,
uh,
that's not a problem. That is not a thing. That is
okay,
false.
maybe if you okay, yeah, that's cool. If you don't mind, like maybe link in the YouTube description to my blog, and I'll provide the peer-reviewed scientific papers for people to read and make up their own mind or something on that. Does that sound fair? Or?
Sure, but again, wouldn't even matter. So again, that doesn't help your case. So fundamental attitude towards physics, the poll literally shows this is false. But again, none of the models in physics here matter. All it matters is it logically possible? It is logically possible to have these things. Therefore, your model is defeated. Because so there's no evidence. Like, everybody in physics agrees there is no free will. That is debunked. There is, like, everybody, there is more people in physics who are going to say free will is debunked than randomness. So my model here still wins when we're asking about what caused the origin of the universe. Free will loses in every single poll. Like, just to quote Sean Carroll, if I was going to ask my colleagues if God had anything to do with the origin of the universe, I would win by a landslide. So if your argument here is that you're going to cite the consensus in physics, the consensus in physics is that your model is the most wrong of all of the models. And so yours loses by the standard you're using.
Gotcha. And yeah, and I wasn't just appealing to consensus. I was using it to lend support, kind of thing, from your perspective and that sort of thing. But yep, you're absolutely right that the majority are compatibilists from my understanding, so that it wouldn't be just hard determinists
Well,
in this
the
case. But
compatibilism adopted in academia is that free will is compatible with determinism, so it's still determined.
gotcha. Okay. All right. Cool. So, do you want to move on to the next one then, or
Okay.
is there anything else in the cosmological that we missed, or you do
Uh,
accept
what?
you're good with the first two premises that about the PSR and that the universe exists contingently.
Well, I know that lots of philosophers dismiss the PSR. I really don't consider it very important at all. I think that it's kind of arbitrary. What a sufficient reason is just an arbitrary definition. We can make up whatever it is. But yeah, I assume things have a cause of some kind, except things that aren't caused. Sure, I think that's just a tautology, and so I'm happy to grant that. What you define as a sufficient reason, I think, is arbitrary. But yeah, I can just grant the general idea of what the argument is trying to get at.
Okay. All right. What There is one last, actually, before we move on to from the cosmological, if you don't mind me just picking your brain on. Okay, so you've been saying all this stuff about entailing eternality means there's an actual infinite, and according to you, it's amount of time within hypertime for the past of the universe and that sort of thing. I'm assuming you're familiar with arguments against for the impossibility of actual infinites
Yeah,
exist.
the Reaper's paradox, all the
Yeah,
sharpshooter paradoxes.
yeah. Um, for you, that I'm guessing there's no problem with that or anything like that, or
Nope.
okay. So let me. You do admit that when certain, if we don't follow certain axioms, that logical contradictions result from that, right? It's illustrated by those paradoxes that you mentioned, or Hilbert's hotel, and that sort of thing. So basically, there are two self-evident principles that all mathematics professors accept in ordinary math. So there's, if you have one set, one, two, three, four, and that corresponds exactly to another set in a one-to-one correspondence, those two sets are the same. They're equal. That's pretty good. Okay,
Sure.
good. Okay, second self-evident principle that every mathematician on the planet admits is that if you have one set, one, two, three, four, and then you have another set that contains some of the same elements, one, two, three, that second set is a subset of the original set. They're not the same numbers.
Sure.
Okay, great. So when we posit an actual infinite taking place, we end up with contradictions, things that contradict one or both of those principles. And that's the basis, the fundamental basis that we say it's logically contradictory, right? So if you, for example, the actual infinite, the number is a left null kind of thing. That's what it's called for the actual infinite. So if you have an infinite number of guests in your hotel, let's say you take out, you subtract, which is not allowed in transfinite math, but in the actual world, there's nothing preventing that. So you take away all of the odd numbered guests. So you're taking a left null minus a left null, and that still equals a left null. You still have an actual. Is this confusing, or I'm judging for
It's just irrelevant. So you can't take out time.
uh, sure you can. You can. Oh well, it gets into modal logic, which you're going to deny. But we let me just ask you and see if it works. Would you say at least you can imagine or conceive of worlds where certain events are taken out and didn't happen or something
Sure.
like that? Okay, so that would be the same as subtracting from a temporal,
Nope.
natural, infinite temporal.
Nope. The fact that you can imagine it isn't the same as actually doing it. So I can imagine a world where I didn't exist, but I can't actually do that. So there's a difference between the fact that you can imagine it and the way it actually is. So again, our conceptions of math are languages. So Gödel's incompleteness theorem, all models of math cannot be shown to be internally consistent. Can't be done. So we don't really care that our models of math can't accurately represent infinites well. Like, okay, doesn't make a difference. The fact that our language can't accurately represent it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it does actually, because we actually know quite a bit about transfinite math. We're not suffering from ignorance on this front. We know this field extremely well since Cantor came. David Hilbert knew what he was doing when he came up with the Hilbert Hotel. This is a relevant thought experiment to the notion of an actual infinite in our world. So we're not suffering from ignorance, and that's why we can't imagine these contradictions arise on the basis of what we actually know about the actual infinite itself.
No, so that's incorrect. Math is a representation of how we imagine things. How it corresponds to reality is a completely separate topic. So, no.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So, yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, keep going with your explanation. Why do you think there is a logical contradiction with a past infinite?
Well, like I said, it leads to actual contradictions when you subtract, or if you don't actually subtract moments, but you just say, what's the number of, we can definitely,
Infinity isn't a number. Infinity is a set.
infinity is a number. It's a left null.
Nope.
And if
It's not what it means to have a past infinite.
okay, wait, sorry, say that again.
No. So infinity isn't a number. It is a class. It is a set of things that continue on indefinitely.
So it's okay.
So
So
just
you
in
don't.
math, if you just Google is infinity a number, the answer is no. Infinity is not a number.
Well, that's wrong. But it seems like to I will bet you.
Literally every single one of the videos of the mathematicians explaining this say no, infinity is not a number. In every single model of set theory, like infinity is not a number. No, they literally all say this: is infinity a number? Is infinity a number?
You'll look up
No.
Aleph null
I
and
know what
also
Aleph null is. The smallest countable infinite. It's still not a number. Infinity is not a number. It is a kind of number.
right. It's a transfinite number, but that's what we use. It is considered an actual quantity in transfinite math. Um, so that's a number kind of thing. But yeah, I wanted to make one last point on this infinite thing and see how you reacted. You react to it, but forget about taking out moments of time or subtracting. We can just count up the numbers, right? So let's pretend we go back in time one, minus two, minus three out to actual infinity, according to you, because it's eternal. If we say how many moments were there before from minus 2 point all the way back to the past, that it's an actual infinite. That is that Aleph null is the answer. But if we do the same from 1945, so that's minus 45, again, you get the same answer, Aleph null. These violate those two mathematical principles that result in contradictions. And I'm
Nope.
guessing that's where you'll just, it doesn't result in contradictions, or you're saying you
No,
just don't care?
there's no contradiction there. It's not a contradiction at all because it's a set of all possible additions there. So it's a past infinite set. There's no contradiction there that they're not the same size. They just have the same cardinality. Like, oh, that box is blue, and oh, that box is also blue. Congratulations. So you're not there's not an actual number there. That is a set that has the past infinite. They both have the same cardinality. They're not the same number. So these contradictions with infinites aren't contradictions at all. They're just ways that we can't imagine infinites because it's not a number, it's a set.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks for your take on that. All right, cool. So, the ontological argument. I know that you did a recent video on that. So, the modal ontological argument basically just says, look, it's possible that a maximally great being exists. I'm using William Lane Craig's version of it. And then premise two, a maximally great being exists in some possible world. Three, if a maximally great being exists in some possible world, well, then by definition, it exists in every possible world. Therefore, premise four, that maximal great being exists in the actual world being one of those possible worlds. And if a maximum great being exists in the actual world, therefore it exists. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you. I know some of your objections to this argument.
Yeah, so you're saying there's an actual definition of greatness and some things objectively have more greatness and less greatness.
There's an actual objective property of greatness. Not necessarily. So there are certain properties that are ascribed to a maximally great being, right? So
Right. And there's a true set and a false set. So if I said pineapple, there's pineapple in it, you'd say that is false. That is not the correct definition of maximally great.
yes,
There is an objectively correct set of properties and an objectively incorrect set of properties.
yeah, there are an objective sense of properties that we give the label as being great, perhaps. So having power is a great making property, for example, right?
Having pineapple is a great making property.
On what basis would you say that, though?
Because I like it better than power. On what basis do you make up great making properties?
Okay, so the point I'm making, though, with taste, that's not necessarily an objective standard. There could be subjective standards. Our world is a mixed world, right? Some things, like with taste, might have a subjective basis or standard. So you like pineapple, I don't like pineapple, and that sort of thing. But other things are objective. I think it's an objective thing that having the power to do something versus being impotent, the power to do something is greater than not being having the power to do something. I
Where
think
that
that,
seems just like a subjective basis to you. Like that may not be the case. Like whose opinion is this based off of?
yeah. So I would just say it just seems to be a properly basic belief.
It
For
doesn't seem to make any sense. It seems like you've made up a definition. You have a feeling, and you have this feeling corresponds to these things and not these things. I have a feeling that pineapples are great, and it doesn't correspond to power. I don't care about power. All power isn't really inherent in greatness. Pineapples are inherent in greatness. In what way are you saying that there's this correct definition of greatness, and you can show this that this one's the correct definition is not just made up?
Well, I think in terms of the things that you're saying, yeah, it's just obvious to most people, including yourself. I know that you're playing a role with the pineapple thing, but I think that if you're honest, you would say that you know that having the power to do something is greater than being impotent, kind of thing.
Well, this is the part where the argument doesn't make any sense because greater is a human emotion. So it's obvious that when I'm hungry, I feel hunger. Does that mean that hunger is a fundamental objective property of the universe? No. So the fact that I have this feeling, and yes, I feel having power is greater because I like power because of my psychology. Does that mean that there is an actually objective quality of greater there? No. So this is the disconnect here. You're saying you have a feeling of greatness or greatnessy or
Mhm.
greatnessy or whatever,
Yeah.
and you think this exists as a real thing. This is a real thing that exists in the universe. There is a real objective greatness property in the universe. It's not just a feeling you have, not like hunger or beauty or whatever. It's a real thing that there is an objective truth to it. And that's the part we're trying to get at. So you can't say I have a feeling this is greater because that's just your subjective feeling, no different than hunger. So we want to know how did you get to the objective definition of greater that isn't just a feeling?
Yeah, so that's where I brought in that it's a properly basic belief on most people's parts. I mean, to say that it's greater to be impotent in some respect, like impotent in the face of Nazi soldiers or something. You can't stop them from killing people. Most people would say, no, that's not a great making property. It's better to have power to stop that guy in that context. And we can make up several thought experiments and that sort of thing that I think every single time people will answer it's greater to have the power to do something. And
Yeah, but the question is what do they mean by greater? If they just mean I have a psychological feeling and nothing more, then I can agree and say, yeah, it's greater based on my psychological feeling. But you're saying something more than that. You're saying it's not just a psychological feeling, there is an objective quality of greaterness. And that it's true that this is an objectively greater thing. And that's the part I'm getting at is like, why do you think the greatness is a thing beyond just a psychological state of humans?
well, the greatness isn't a thing. It's an evaluation, right? So it's an evaluative belief or judgment that that evaluators make of certain properties like power or knowledge or something like that, and we make that evaluation. Um, this is greater than that.
Well, that's just subjective. So everybody can subjectively make their own criteria of what's great, but you're saying again there is an objectively correct definition beyond human subjective evaluations. If it's just human subjective evaluations, you got nothing. So you're saying there's an objective thing that is true beyond human subjective evaluations, right?
Yeah, but it would still be ground. So evaluative judgments, and we'll get to this when we get to the argument from beauty that I wanted to get your take on. It's not something I've developed fully, but evaluations require an evaluator, right? So obviously the objective standard that's objective, you're defining it in the sense that it's not based on human beliefs or human evaluations. Obviously, God is the ultimate objective standard. His evaluations, his judgments about the greatness or worseness or something, that forms the objective basis. Now, how do I, as a human being, know what God's evaluations are? And obviously, as a Christian, I would say, well, we're designed to mimic God's evaluations in this way.
I'm trying. So even if we grant that, that's fine. But I want to
Okay.
say, how do we get to the part that this greatness is objective and is more than just a psychological human state? Because to me, it seems psychological human state, nothing more than a psychological human state. You're saying there is something more objective there. Greatness really objectively exists, independent of human evaluation. Maybe some other evaluation, I don't care, but it's objective from human evaluation. Human evaluations have no say on this. There is an objective truth. This is the correct greatness. How did you get to that? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, like I said, the only way, how do I know that I'm designed to mimic God's judgments and that God does have this objective standard, and not even involving God? I know that it's an objective standard through a properly basic belief. It's kind of the same answer that you'll hear about moral value judgments. And they'll say, well, look, we've got this faculty that produces properly basic beliefs in this respect. And that's sort of the fundamental way that I know that there's this objective value, greatness, quote unquote, greatness value to power, to having knowledge, and stuff like that. So that's really the only other way. In terms of an objective argument, again, I've never come up with one on this front, but it would probably be, you'd have to come up with some way of refuting subjectivism. So like moral philosophers refute moral subjectivism.
Well, just to use an example, like real properties, mass, spin, charge, we can demonstrate these things exist objectively independent of human evaluations by demonstrating them empirically. That works really well. So we can know these are real properties, not imaginary properties. Cling on this, cheat on this, my video, like there's lots of imaginary properties. Greatness seems to be, if we're saying, well, which one is the greatness? Is it one of the real ones or the imaginary ones? It seems a whole lot like the imaginary ones. That's just a product of human psychology, and you're saying it's more than that, and you've got to provide some evidence to that. And it seems like all the arguments just come back to properly basic beliefs, which are arbitrary. So that wouldn't count as evidence.
Well, they're not arbitrary. They are subjective in nature. They're subjective evidence.
Plantinga has admitted they're arbitrary. So like many of the criticisms is that if you grow up in a society with voodoo and voodoo is a part of your culture, is the fundamental nature of reality, then you're justified in believing in voodoo as a properly basic belief. Plantinga's like, yes, that is technically true.
Okay, well, Plantinga is wrong in this respect, right? So it comes down to what is a properly basic belief? Proper with respect to what? With respect to warrant. And I would just say that these people there, they can claim to have a properly basic belief, just like I'm claiming to you to have it. That's meaningless to you. I get it. You're not meant to believe on that basis, but you're asking me on what basis do I claim that there's this objective standard, and the only reason I have is the properly basic belief. And so
okay, let's go with that. So why would properly basic beliefs be justification or warrant of anything and not just a psychological human state that isn't in any way? So like in philosophy, you can have a belief that's justified by your parents. Your parents tell you that Santa Claus exists, and since they're your most reliable source of knowledge, you're justified in believing Santa Claus exists. So you can have bad justifications for false things. And it seems like properly basic beliefs are the exact same thing here as trust in your parents. They're essentially your direct experience, which you believe until it's proven otherwise. But that isn't a reliable way to establish knowledge about reality. We know that is a very unreliable way, but it could be justified. So you can have a justification or a warrant for believing these things. It doesn't mean it's a good one, since we know that there is a better justification called science. And so it would be wrong to trust these properly basic beliefs once you get beyond the level of a child. So it seems like trusting properly basic beliefs is like trusting your parents when they tell you Santa Claus exists. Once you know that that methodology is very shaky and unreliable in many ways, then it is no longer reasonable to trust that methodology. Therefore, for properly basic beliefs, it's not justified to use those when it comes to fundamental nature of reality, because it's just like trusting your parents or your psychology. There's defeaters that show properly basic beliefs are not reliable. Why should we accept properly basic beliefs as a justification for anything?
Okay, so in the first place, yeah, this is going to take us a bit afield. So you're right, absolutely. Mere rational justification is not enough. I don't go for that route. I go for Plantinga's warrant, which is an externalist, reliabilist condition for having knowledge. And so what is knowledge? It's not a justified true belief. It's a warranted true belief. And so properly basic beliefs are proper with respect to warrant. Now, Do you want the definition, or you don't care about that? Or
Well, in philosophy, warrant and justification are used synonymously mostly. Plantinga has his own little strange definition where he's subdivided them, but it doesn't make a difference here. So I would grant that the beliefs are warranted until defeaters are presented. I'm happy to grant that. That's fine, but that's the exact same as saying it's reasonable to believe your parents until defeaters are presented, and that would then justify belief in Santa.
believing your parents is not a reliable mechanism for producing true beliefs, right? So the definition of warrant that I go for, that Plantinga likes, is that it's the belief is produced by a set of faculties functioning properly in a suitable cognitive environment, both maxi and mini environment, and whereby the faculties are successfully aimed at producing true beliefs. So it's very definition rule. You can't, by definition, have a false belief if you're warranted, assuming in the 100% degree. You hold that belief in the 100% degree because the true beliefs are entailed in being warranted, where it's not the case in mere justification.
Well, that's just begging the question. So what we want to know is how do you get to these true beliefs? Why should we believe that this methodology of using properly basic belief gets us to true belief? That's the question. Just defining it as the case doesn't really help us. We want to know is, can this method reliably get us to true beliefs?
Yeah. So this is where this is where I differ from Plantinga. Plantinga just provides a pure externalist uh, foundation for knowledge, that definition of warrant that I just gave. But you can always ask, well, how do we quote unquote know that we're warranted or something? Is that what you're asking, or no?
Uh, so like it would be, how do we, if we say X is warranted and we want to know that this methodology of establishing warrant is correct or incorrect, how do we do that? So like, for example, I could say belief in Santa Claus is warranted. It is, to establish it is either is or is not. What is the methodology we go through to establish whether it is or is not?
Yeah, yeah. What is the faculty that we're using? Our faculties use certain methods and that sort of thing, right? So is our faculty reliable or not? And I think that this is where I go beyond Plantinga. So Plantinga would just say, look, we don't have to be cognizant of what faculty we're using, or whatever. If we just know something, as long as it's produced by that faculty in those conditions, then we have knowledge whether we're aware, conscious of that or not. I go beyond him and say, well, I think in an internalist way, we're aware when those conditions for warrant are satisfied, it produces within us this irresistible inclination to varying degrees towards believing that belief. And this works based on knowledge by acquaintance and that sort of thing. We know that we know, so to speak, right? So when I'm appealing to this properly basic belief about objective properties of power being great, I know through knowledge by acquaintance that my faculties are reliably producing this true belief in that respect, directly through knowledge by acquaintance. So the internal irresistible inclination warrants knowing that the faculties are functioning, and the faculties in turn justify that. It's circular in that way.
Okay, so I know by direct experience the spaghetti monster is real. How do we differentiate between these two claims of warrant?
Yeah. So there would be no way if you're claiming it's properly based in a properly basic way. I just would say you're a liar, just like you would say to me, well, not a liar. I would just say you're wrong. And likewise, you have the right to say to me that I'm just wrong. And that's, if you're going to just deny that power is a great making property, what we would label as a great making property, I don't know how I would prove that to you outside of properly basic beliefs. Like, we would have to maybe come up with some kind of argument similar to how ethicists argue against moral subjectivism or relativism and say that that's incoherent in some way. But I don't have like an argument.
Right. So as you may know, my fundamental epistemology says that everything starts as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. And the fundamental nature of evidence is that which can demonstrate things are not imaginary. And properly basic beliefs, as you just admitted, can't differentiate imaginary from real. You just have to kind of just believe it. You believe it, so it's not imaginary for you. But that doesn't actually tell us that doesn't give us a way to differentiate imagination from reality at all. So like my method would be is if you have an idea that X is properly basic, I have an idea that Y is properly basic. The way to tell the difference is novel testable predictions. Whichever one can do that is the one that's more likely to be real, and we have a justification for believing that one and not the other one. But yours doesn't seem to provide any way to differentiate imagination from reality at all. You just kind of say, well, I feel this way, you feel that way, and I think you're wrong, you think I'm wrong. But that doesn't give us any kind of evidential basis at all. That doesn't differentiate imagination from reality. So it seems like properly basic beliefs as a method don't give us what we are looking for when we're looking for evidence, which is a way to differentiate imagination from reality.
Well, it does. So they're subjective evidences. They are evidence, and they do give us a way. They give you a way to adjudicate. Dale, you are full of rubbish. You're saying all these things, but I don't believe you. If you truly do have a properly basic belief, and you know that you know through not through your own internal irresistible inclinations, you've got this that you are warranted in that respect. It doesn't matter what false claims I give you. You know for a fact that 2 + 2 can equal 5, right? I'm denying that, and does my denial of that, and you have no way to show to me that it can equal that, as far as I know. Um, does my denial falsify that you already know that? No.
Uh, okay, so let me phrase it this way: properly basic beliefs are not a thing. There is no such thing as a warranted belief just by the fact that you have the belief, other than like you exist.
Right. People can have false beliefs, but we don't just have the belief. Number one, it's a basic belief, under foundational. It's a basic belief. It's not derived from any other premises, so there is no chance of false logical inferences or false premises or something. It's a direct, immediate, basic belief. Right away, I don't have to worry about those flaws. And it's also proper with respect to warrant. And I know that just by simple introspection of having knowledge by acquaintance of the warrant that I have for that.
Okay, and I'm saying that nope, there is no psychological belief that counts as justified because we know evolution is a thing and brains do silly things. Therefore, all properly basic beliefs have been defeated because we know our brains make silly beliefs all the time.
Gotcha. They do make silly beliefs for sure, but they never provide silly beliefs or false beliefs when it's. I've never encountered a belief that I had that was properly basic and held in 100% degree. That was wrong. Okay, we can end here because this isn't helping the audience, right? So like,
Well, I
I
mean,
get
like
that.
every single religious person is going to say their properly basic belief. They've never encountered a properly basic belief they think is wrong until you become an atheist. And you're like, oh, yep, that properly basic belief is wrong. So,
I can give an example. No, it's not going to help.
well, I
I
mean,
was going to.
take an example. If you became an atheist, then you would have in the past I had a properly basic belief, and I found out that it was wrong. Right? That's what it would mean if you became an atheist.
Yeah. And I was an agnostic. I was never an atheist, but I was an agnostic for a period of 6 months when I left the church. So I experienced this. I would have said I had 100% knowledge that King James Version onlyism was true back in my younger day. But that wasn't a properly basic belief. When I reflected upon it, it was actually based on premises of how I construed the nature of God and stuff like that. They were hidden to my subconscious, but once I reflected on it, it wasn't a properly basic belief. It was a derived belief.
Right, right. But my point here is that it's pretty easy to conceive of people, and there are people who used to believe properly basic beliefs and found out they were wrong. That's not a hard thing to conceive of. It happens all the time. People have, because things that would count as properly basic beliefs, not everyone would define as a properly basic belief. They can have one without realizing it, as Plantinga has said. So people have had properly basic beliefs and realized, oh, those were wrong, and converted to a different religion or a different belief system or whatever. Happens all the time. So it seems defeated that properly basic beliefs are a justified basis of knowledge or warranted basis of knowledge because people change them all the time and they get them wrong all the time. They have to because they have different contradictory ones at different times.
Mhm. And those, and you would say in the one held in the 100% degree of warrant.
Um,
Because I'm warranted in certain beliefs, but I don't have 100%. I could be wrong or mistaken on that front. it's possible, right?
Right. That's what I said earlier. Like you can be justified in believing Santa Claus exists, and it can be a false belief. Like warrant doesn't need to be 100%.
Okay, got you. So yeah, so the only thing I would push back on, and again, I want to be interesting for your audience. They're probably getting bored of this, so I'll let this be my last thing on the properly basic. Unless it's your show, you tell me what you want to talk about. But I would just deny that when it held in the 100% degree, it is impossible for me to be wrong about my properly basic belief because I have internal knowledge by acquaintance that I'm warranted in this respect.
Wait,
That's
wait. I think that sounds like a double negative. Like
oh, did it?
in the 100% belief, you would deny that it is impossible to be wrong. So you're saying you couldn't be wrong? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. When I have a properly basic belief held in the 100% degree of warrant, I cannot be wrong, and
Right. And
I
so
know
I would
this.
say that's demonstrably false because people have had that and then changed beliefs and have the 100% opposite properly basic belief, and so one of them must necessarily be wrong.
How would you prove that to me then? Because you just saying it, right? It's as meaningless as me telling you that I'm 100% warranted in thinking God exists or saying what I'm saying. Do you have any way, apart from just saying, well, this guy said he had it, and then he changed his mind? Um, like there's no way to prove that he actually was warranted as opposed to just mimicking the lines, you know? Like you said,
Right. So I would just use induction there. I'd say it's pretty reasonable to believe their testimony since they're the same exact psychology that you have. Humans in general have a pretty similar brain structure and belief systems. So him having the same kinds of belief systems that you do and then changing them is perfectly logically coherent. So it seems more reasonable to believe that testimony than that warranted beliefs, which are somehow subjective to one person and doesn't really seem to be able to do anything, is a far less reliable metric than believing people that have changed religions, which seems far more reasonable to believe is a real thing. So, like, if we're comparing the two different kinds of testimony, one is yours of a warranted belief, and one is someone else's that they had a warranted belief and changed it. The changing one seems far more reasonable to believe given the faculties they're using human brains and human psychology, and so that's a very common thing in human psychology, than it is to think that you have some kind of special access to reality in your psychological state.
okay, I think that's actually a pretty good argument or attempt there. But inductively, I would maybe object to you based on your grounds. You know, stuff you say against Christians usually. And, you know, people are liars. People delude themselves. These are proven all the time and that sort of thing. And they make false claims, not even purposefully lying. They some like myself. I gave my own example where I was said yes, I 100% know, and I was totally wrong. Um, so I was deluded in that sense. So why doesn't that factor into your thing and say, well, actually, no, we wouldn't have reason to just take their testimony at face value because there's so many cases of people lying and or self-deluded about what they claim to know.
Well, it would. So I would completely agree with that. I would say that everything starts as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. And so everybody starts as lying, essentially. Everything is a lie until it's has some way to differentiate itself from being imaginary. And so I would say that the imaginary criterion of warrant counts as a lie, just like as the imaginary criterion of not having warrant counts as a lie until there's some way to differentiate which is real and which is imaginary. And so I'd say both can be counted as lies. Both are just imaginary things that both people have. And the burden of proof would be on the one making the claim that there is this new methodology to show that it is a real thing independent of imagination, which I think you would have because you're claiming that warrant is a justified belief kind of a thing. And they're claiming it's not. And so you would hold the burden of proof to show that it's not imaginary. And so the default position would be it's not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah. In terms of our fundamental method, because there's this kind of, I guess I would appeal to you that try to get you to acknowledge that you do have properly basic beliefs that you claim to have knowledge on, even on these secondary qualities or properties, what you call imaginary properties. And if I can get one
Mm-hmm.
of those, that would establish the plausibility, at least, of my appeal. I don't know. Do you want to try that or?
Sure. So my epistemology starts with I experience, therefore I exist.
Oh, no, no. Okay. Yeah, I'm not doing the Darth Dawkins thing. No, I was just going to say, so there's primary qualities, right? So when we take the color, you're wearing a red shirt. That's color is a secondary quality. It's an imaginary property, as you would call it, right? That doesn't exist in the physical world. It's just light reflecting off an object in a certain way.
Well, again, I'm a materialist, so I would say the color does literally exist in the material world. But
It's okay. It is what. So what is the physical basis for that? Because my understanding is color is just
well, I don't
light
want
wave.
to. I don't want to. I still want to go on the topic. If you're saying that something about properly basic properties or something, colors, it's a slightly different topic. Or is it the same topic? I'm not sure.
It's yeah. So I'm trying to establish color for you. There is this color redness. You said it does exist. So
Yep.
and that's in a properly basic way. It presents itself subjectively to you, and you take that as a sound foundation to be warranted. So it's a properly basic belief that you
Well, I
don't.
wouldn't say it was properly basic. That's. I would say that, uh, based on science, what I know about science, I'm coming to the conclusion that it exists, not just properly basic. Like I wouldn't say that my direct experience of redness is proof that redness exists. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that that's the justification.
Okay, so you're saying before you became the smart guy that you are and knew all about the science, as a 10-year-old boy, you didn't know that the color red existed?
Uh, I think before I understood the science, I would probably say it didn't exist. Maybe like because I would say color is just a figment of our imagination, and I would count that as probably not existing when I was a kid.
Our imaginations exist in
Oh, right,
reality.
right. But we're before you know understand science and topics. What would I have said when I was a kid? That seems to be
Gotcha.
your question.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't. I'd probably say colors don't exist. They're
Wow.
imaginary or something.
Okay. Okay. So that strategy failed then. I wouldn't. I was hoping you would say, yeah, you did know, and the only way you could know it's directly through your sense faculties, and it presents itself to you directly in this properly basic way. But yeah, if you would deny, you're consistent.
Yeah, because I would see it like
And to see
the
it
illusions,
directly.
hallucinations, those kinds of things. I'd say, do those exist? Does the mirage exist? Like, no. Like I wouldn't say the fact that I have direct experience of the mirage means that the ocean exists. No.
Yeah, but something exists, right? The mirage of the ocean still exists, and you're still getting that sensation of blueness from the thing. So the color itself, whether it's an illusion or not, is presenting itself as a property to you, and it's not grounded in the primary properties as you called them, like the physical, light waves reflecting off that. Um, so yeah, that's what I was trying to do. But yeah, if it didn't work, no worries.
Yeah, I'm not. Definitely not sure I'm following because I see it as just it is a thing produced by the brain. But I think that would be a primary quality. I think colors are a primary quality, a thing produced by the brain.
Well, there's nothing in your brain that's has the redness, right?
Well, I would
So
say
this,
there is. So again, pure materialist. I think that the colors are literally a thing in the brain, literally physically a thing in the brain. So they would be a primary quality of some interaction thing in the brain that produces these colors. But I don't think redness is a quality of things. It's a quality of the brain.
well, it could be caused by a brain state, right? But the sensation itself isn't the brain state.
Well, I'd say it is. So I'd say that literally the physical thing, the experience itself is literally a brain state of some kind. We don't know how to best explain that because we haven't solved consciousness yet. But I'd say, yeah, experience itself is literally a physical thing in the brain somewhere.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask this then. This is an interesting argument that I've heard, and it involves science from Eric LaRock. He's famous in the philosophy of mind and that sort of thing. It's called the unity of our visual field argument, or our conscious field, if you want to widen it to stuff. And it basically says, look, we experience reality as a totalizing conscious state, right? I'm hearing stuff. I'm seeing all the colors in your video here, like red and your glasses, stuff like that. So we have this unity of a visual field. No one would deny that. But on if we are just atomistic in the way that you're proposing, like the color is literally this brain state and that brain state, he argues neuroscientists have shown that the brain states responsible are disconnected in such a way that they couldn't produce this unified visual field. It should be atomistic in nature, but we don't experience it that way. So I don't know if you've ever heard that argument, or like, well, if you have, what do you make of it? But I don't want to put you on the spot if you haven't heard of that before.
I don't see a problem with it being atomistic. I think it is atomistic. I don't understand the argument. Like
Because
pixels
we
on a
don't,
screen. There's each
yep.
pixel is an atom and it just blurs together. So it is actually atomistic. We just have this delusion that it's not.
But yeah, but there couldn't be a delusion if it really is reducible down to brain states. We would see it pixelated. We would see the world disconnected because they're isolated brain states that produces these various, or in your, they don't even produce. They're identical to these sensations, as you say.
Sure.
So yeah, so they have to be atomistic. They can't be unified, and that's what we experience.
Well, there can be. So, like, one of the theories of consciousness is that it gets unified in the thalamus, in that it's all brought together in a semi-unified way. That it is literally unified. So, yeah, I don't see a problem with saying that. I don't understand the issue here. Like, the,
That Eric Lorock, he's basically just saying, yeah, there's nothing in the brain. Scientifically, we know the thalamus, nothing unifies these states to produce this totalizing state.
well, one of the theories is that there are lots of theories that it is unified. I think that it's probably not. I think the Vinod-Menon model of the three different systems thingy is more likely to be the case. But I don't see a problem here. Like, you can't say it cannot be done by the brain. We just don't know enough. We don't know enough about consciousness to know it can or can't be done. So anyone who says it can't be done is just wrong, because we don't know. So if you don't know, you can't say it can't be done. So I'd say that that's essentially the state of consciousness is we don't know, and that's where it stops. You can never say it can't be done because we don't know enough to say it can't be done.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Yeah, and I will semi agree with you. I do think that we know enough to say that it's improbable, but definitely we don't know enough to say it can't be done.
All right, so we probably I'd say yeah, it can't be done with the stuff we know about for sure, but I don't think we don't know nearly enough about what's going on in the brain to say anything of value there.
Awesome. All right, cool. All right, yeah. So yeah, I guess the next argument, if you're good with moving on, or if do you have anything else to?
No, I'm still not sure I'm understanding the properties thingy, the properly basic beliefs as justification thingy. You were talking about how you were trying to get me to accept secondary qualities or something.
Oh, yeah. So I would just have to say that, like, I would need to establish with you, like, from an argument from consciousness, that number one, our brain states are not identical. They stand in causal relations to sensations, like of redness and that sort of thing.
Would that be required for the properly basic thing?
It would be. Well, I guess it wouldn't even. Yeah, it wouldn't even need to be required. It would just. Yeah, I would just need to establish that the mechanism by which you, as a 10-year-old, knew that the color red existed is in this direct, properly basic way. And if you had said yes to that, and you're a weird 10-year-old, I have to say, if you denied.
Well, yeah. So let's take that hypothetically. So as a 10-year-old, I believed the ocean existed when I saw the mirage in the exact same way I believed redness existed. One was right, one was wrong. I'm using the same mechanisms in both cases. So it seems like that is not a reliable method. The 10-year-old experience logic is not a good method to differentiate imagination from reality, because the same method comes to the conclusion that many imaginary things are in fact real when they're not.
Well, there's a fundamental difference here, right? Because so with the redness, this is a properly basic belief. That's the mechanism. It's directly, you're seeing redness. You've had this sensation directly. That impossible for that to be a mirage. Whereas with the mirage of the ocean, that's through derivative knowledge, like with me in the King James Version. You're using your senses, you're using your sense faculties, Well, no, you're not. But if it's a hallucination, whatever, you're using your faculties and you're deriving, hey, I'm seeing this, therefore it must be real. So there's a fundamental difference. That's derivative knowledge, even if it's subconsciously derivative. Whereas the redness is directly to your that's properly basic. You can't be wrong that you're seeing redness.
Oh, right, right. So if you're just talking about your personal experience and the things you experience, you can't be wrong. But if you're saying there is something objective that exists independent of your experience, then it all becomes derivative. So a God exists, that would be derivative. Greatness exists, that would be derivative. Saying that you have a subjective opinion that greatness is X would be just your opinion. Like you couldn't be wrong that you think greatness is X, but you could be wrong that greatness objectively is X. So anything that you said would be objectively true outside of your experience would be derivative, like God, greatness, any properly basic belief outside of your direct experience.
Okay, so cool. Let's pretend you're right. That redness isn't an objective thing, but you're admitting the validity of the properly basic mechanism for knowing that there is this redness sensation in a properly basic way, and you've got knowledge that you're being presented to with redness.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So if you want to say properly basic beliefs can justify direct experience of things that you're experiencing, sure. So I have a direct experience of X. That could be justified. Any statement I have a direct experience of X, if you're experiencing it, would be justified. But the second claim that this thing, whatever you're experiencing, objectively exists independent of your experience, that can't be justified by any properly basic belief. That would require more.
okay, so what my argument is that no, it doesn't require more. In the same way that redness is directly immediate to your uh, consciousness in this properly basic way, for most people, and what I'm saying for myself, the greatness of power is immediately present to me. When I'm presented with power, that's great. It's immediate and direct. I'm not deriving that from hidden premises or something like that. Like, oh, power is the ability to do this. Premise two, the ability to do this is great, or stuff like that. It's the same way as redness.
Right,
It's
right. But that problem here is that if you say redness, there is an objectively true redness. So like if I see the apple as red, you see the apple as red, this is the correct redness. This is the objectively true redness that I see, and what you see isn't real redness. Um, then you're making a claim that not only about your direct experience, you're claiming there is some objective truth beyond your direct experience. And that would have to be derivative no matter what you're claiming, anytime, no matter what. So you couldn't say that just your direct experience would justify the claim that there is an objective truth to the redness beyond your experience. So that's when you say, I think greatness is power or whatever. That's perfectly fine as a subjective belief that you have. But if you want to say there is an objective set of properties that are objectively great beyond your direct experience, that's the part that would have to be derivative. That you couldn't use direct experience for that. That would just be subjective.
yeah. So I would disagree with that because it's the same in the same way that I get what you're giving a derivative type of argument to establish there's differences, right? Like there is no objective redness standard. Let's just pretend that's the
Yeah, like I
case.
see red, you see green. Someone who's
Yeah,
colorblind sees black or white.
but your sensation of redness is you have faculties that are able to experience this sensation of redness. In response, your faculties produce a properly basic belief, and that is proper with respect to warrant. You obtain a warranted true belief that you are experiencing redness, whether that's
Yep.
objective or subjective, who cares? So I'm saying those same factors, right? Those conditions for warrant that produce an irresistible inclination to believe that in a properly basic way are present with respect to the objective greatness. So
So that seems to be a contradiction here. So I have a warranted, justified belief that I am experiencing redness. Yes. Does that redness, do I have a warranted, justified belief that redness exists beyond my experience? No.
sure.
So greatness would apply the same thing. I could say I have a warranted belief that I think X is great. But do I have a warranted belief that that is objectively great? No. So the only thing you would have a warranted belief is that that is a subjective product of your mind. You would not be warranted in believing it's more than a subjective product of your mind just based off of the properly basic belief or the direct
That
experience.
that was such a so first of all, thank you. That was such a perfect analogy. You're exactly right. I 100% agree. But what I'm saying is that those conditions that allow you to have knowledge in the subjective cases also apply for me and I would argue for most people, not for yourself, in the objective case with respect to the greatness thing, at least, right? So I also have that in a properly basic way, the same factors, irresistible inclination, is produced with respect to this. Um, that yes, and it's objective, and so I've got I would affirm three propositions in a properly basic way, whereas you would only affirm two. So that's the difference
How do
between
you
them.
how do you get to the objective thing? So I get the subjective thing. You have a subjective experience that X is great, or that you see red. Okay. How do you get to the objective thing that's true, independent of just your subjective brain state?
So it's because within the subjective case we find out how knowledge works, and both of us affirm this, right? We find out, okay, I'm having this sensation of redness. It must have been warranted in some way, the sensation kind of thing on a subjectivist level, right? It was produced by certain faculties doing what they do in certain environments and that sort of thing. And then this in turn produces an irresistible inclination towards believing this properly basic belief that I am seeing or experiencing redness, right? And you would claim that that is knowledge, that you know you're experiencing redness. So we figure out how does mechanics, what is the qualia of knowledge and that sort of thing, and then we can apply that to other propositions such as the objectiveness of greatness. It's the exact same process, and I'm privy to that. This is not making any sense, I can tell from your
Yeah. So the process is I have a direct experience, therefore I know of my direct experience. That part I'm happy with. But you
sure.
could say I know of things beyond my direct experience, then it stops working.
Well, the problem, see, so you're not understanding properly. There is no therefore. You're putting this into an argument again, right? Like you're trying to say, well, I have this experience, and maybe, I don't know, given some philosophical principle whereby I know my faculties are reliable, therefore I am seeing redness. That you're not understanding what a properly basic belief is. Then no, it's just
Yeah. So I'm just trying to express it here. But I'm saying I have
uh,
a direct experience of my experience. That part is fine. But saying I have a direct experience of things beyond my direct experience, that part is not fine.
okay. So put it this way: we're not when we have that when we're talking in the subjectivist sense with this red shirt, we're having two experiences in this case. We're not just experiencing the sensation of redness, you're also experiencing knowledge. You're through knowledge by acquaintance, you're acquainted with what it's like to have knowledge, the experience of gaining knowledge itself.
Well,
And
I
that,
have a belief, which might be knowledge.
well, it's when it comes to redness, you know those beliefs incorrigibly. It's impossible for you to be false in that respect, right? When you see the sensation of colors and stuff like that, we know those truths incorrigibly. It's warrant in the 100% degree.
Well, I can think I'm seeing red and I'm actually seeing green. Like I just label it as red incorrectly. Like it's
Yeah, but
possible that I have an experience of green and I'm under the delusion that it's red.
you're still experiencing redness, whether you're deluded or not. It doesn't matter
No. So
whether
so literally, I have a direct. My qualia is of green, but my brain fails to establish the correct association between the thing I'm seeing and the label green and labels it as red.
okay. So like yeah. So that's just kind of a
So
disconnect. I don't see that as relevant to the argument.
well, I have a belief that it's red, but it's a false belief. But it's still direct experience. So I have a properly basic belief that I am seeing green when I'm not. I'm actually seeing red because my brain has failed in a way that even though I have a direct experience of redness, my brain has labeled it incorrectly as green in my head, even though I know the difference between the two. So I know what red is and I know what green is and I'm seeing green, but my brain has failed and it has labeled it as uh, red even when it's not.
So that's definitely possible and not a problem if it's just the mislabeling of it. But if you're saying no, you are having this direct experience of green, and somehow your brain is malfunctioning to where you're seeing it as red. You're not just mislabeling it, but you're actually experiencing it differently. Then number one, I would just say that's that's impossible to happen, right? You can't experience it as green and experience it as red. It's either green or it's red. So in whatever experience you're having, it's either
Well,
one or the other.
that's the thing. I'm pretty sure we do have examples of that in neurology. There are lots of examples of that where you're literally experiencing something, but you're describing it as something else, and that both occur in your brain, in your consciousness at the same time, because your consciousness is doing multiple things at the same time. So that does actually happen, where you are literally experiencing something and the experience is correct, and then your brain defines it or describes it in a different way with a different experience, because you can have multiple experiences at the same time and they conflict, and that's perfectly fine. That happens all the time. There's like the many different experiments that show that in neurology.
So I would, yeah. So if you don't like, I would need to see these papers. But if it sounds like what you're saying is number one, it's a linguistics thing. They're just late. They're seeing a red ball and they're saying, oh, there's the green ball. So the malfunction is in how they're linguistically describing it, not in the experience itself. If it is the experience itself, you're saying they're experiencing multiple things. So maybe they're seeing the red ball and they're imagining a green ball at the same time. Like I would need to know the details because it sounds like it's a bit off in what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's like in your visual space, whatever you're imagining is going on. It's not, there's a visual aspect to it. So your visual cortex is activated, so you have a visual model, but then also the prefrontal cortex is activated, so it's building relations between those things. And these are separate things that are both going on to build the world that you see. And they can contradict. Like you can, the forget what it's called, the one where you see your mother's face but say it's not your mother. There are these psychological states where you see exactly what your mother is, but think it's not your mother at the same time, because the two parts of your brain are contradicting. They're sending different signals to the same thing. So you could have both of those would qualify as properly basic beliefs at the same time. I have a properly basic belief I'm seeing my mother, and I have a properly basic belief I'm not seeing my mother, even though the sense experience is the same, because you have two different parts of your brain both activated to the same experience. We know that the brain does this all the time. So properly basic beliefs are definitely not warranted, because we know how fundamentally flawed the brain is and that it can do this, and it does it often, that there are direct experiences we have from the visual space and direct experiences we have from the association space of the connections between those things, and those don't always correlate.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess definitely people can have contradictory beliefs. I'm iffy on whether they could have contradictory experiences, like experiencing their mom and not experiencing it. But the way I would resolve that is obviously if it's it wouldn't be based on true, properly basic beliefs. There would have to be some kind of derivative knowledge that's leading to the false belief in some way. Like perhaps they're, but again, I'm speaking out of ignorance. I don't know the experiments, so I would I should shut up and let me read them rather than speak out of ignorance.
There's V.S. Ramachandran's works on, I can't remember what it's called anymore. Imposter syndrome, I think.
Okay.
But yes, so the way I see it is that properly basic beliefs is a fundamentally flawed method to establish the truth of claims, because all of those direct experiences you're talking about and the knowledge associated with them are a result of our flawed brains, and they can't be trusted to be anything more than just I have experienced X, and there's no greater connection that could ever be made there
Gotcha.
about
All right.
objective things. But I actually have to go to the bathroom. Give me 1 minute.
No worries.
All right, I am back.
Okay.
So is your argument that I have an experience of experience and I have an experience of knowledge, so I can compare. If I have an experience of having knowledge in one case, I can have experience of having knowledge in another case.
Yeah, the experience of knowledge doesn't differ just because the propositions are of a different type or a different nature. Right? The experience is the same regardless. Knowledge is knowledge.
Well, I don't think you can have an experience of having knowledge. I think the experience of having knowledge and the experience of having false knowledge is the exact same.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I would, my perspective would be to deny that and just based on my own experiences. When I've held knowledge only in the 100% degree, right? I've had been warranted or experienced knowledge in lesser degrees, and it's turned out I've been wrong. That's totally fine. That's not a problem. In that case, I just follow the evidence where it leads, right? Like with Christianity, I converted on the basis of 53.14%. Obviously, I could be wrong. Christianity could be false, even though I would claim to be warranted. And part of the evidence set for Christianity that I have, there's four positive evidences, one of which was a properly basic belief from the inner witness of the Holy Spirit as one of the positive factors, kind of thing, right? So in that way, but yeah, it didn't provide 100% knowledge. I could be wrong, but if it's in the 100% degree, I've never experienced uh, anything like that where I've been 100% warranted, felt 100% warranted in this way, and it turns out I'm false every single time. It turns out it's based on faulty premises or something like that. But
Okay,
yeah,
but you have experienced it in the cases of less certain cases where because being wrong and being right feel the exact same. Like, someone who believes the world is flat and someone who believes the world is round, they both feel the same way that they're right.
yeah, that is a good point. I'm trying to Yeah, so with my example in the King James version onlyism, I had the exact same experience, and I was wrong. I turned out to be wrong on that. The experience of knowledge. Um, but I think I would explain that again because it's through derivative knowledge. I was 100% right, right? I turned out to be true. That given the truth of those premises, the conclusion was true, and this is why was mislabeling and say, yeah, I do have 100% knowledge that King James version onlyism is true, but I wasn't focused on the premises because those were in my subconscious. I wasn't really realizing, but these are based on certain premises, and you don't have a properly basic belief that those premises are true. Those premises are in fact false. So I think something like that has to be going on whenever somebody is having this a properly basic belief and they think something's true in this way, that it's got to be explained based on some kind of factor like that. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure how that would apply in the case because I don't think the premises matter. Like what premises you use to come to the conclusion doesn't seem to make a difference to whether or not the conclusion is true. Like you can just say conclusion X, and the truth of the conclusion is independent of any premises. Like it only counts as knowledge if you have like justified true belief, but the truth of the conclusion is completely independent of whether or not it's knowledge. So if we're asking about an ontology claim, it is ontologically the case that either X or not X, whatever your proposition is. And if you want to say it's a true belief, for it to be knowledge, it has to be true. The truth of it is completely independent of the premises, right?
For sure, yeah. But I would just say so that's what I mean. Like I kind of like the people in your experiment. I was mislabeling and say I had it's undeniable. I had the same experience of knowledge that I'm having right now, and I'm saying it's properly basic that blah blah blah. But that wasn't a misnomer. It was just misapplied. I just would have misapplied it to the proposition being, King James version onlyism is true, kind of thing. I was misapplying it to that. Whereas in reality, the experience of knowledge was grounded in the logical inference I was making that this conclusion is true on the basis of these subconscious premises that God is perfect and he can't inspire anything with error or stuff. Like I never spelled it out or was
Well,
conscious.
I'm not like the premises don't matter. What I'm asking is, should we claim the experience of knowledge is itself a justification.
Yes, I think so.
Why? Because again, the experience of knowledge is exactly the same as the experience of false knowledge. So people have like
But
properly
it's no,
basic beliefs and they can be false. Like I have a direct experience that there is an ocean there, and that is
well, this is so. So that's what I was trying to. I guess I didn't establish. That's what I was trying to say is that no, the experience of knowledge is only works if you actually have knowledge, kind of thing. That's just self-evident. So if somebody is applying, saying they have the experience of knowledge of some proposition that turns out to be false, right? If you're having that experience of knowledge, then you must have knowledge of something. And this is why it's critical on us to introspect and really think about, well, am I having a properly basic belief about this proposition, or am I subconsciously deriving it from something else? Or you have to assess whether you actually are having a properly basic belief versus just an unjustified belief on some other basis. You know what I mean? Like you can't just, it's not an easy thing. You can't just assert out of nowhere, like I have a properly basic belief about this or something like that. You know, you really need to reflect on it, and do you actually have that or not?
so. I'm not seeing how you could reflect on anything that isn't direct experience and count it as knowledge. Like your experience of knowledge, having an experience of knowledge would only count as 100% if it was self-referential. I am experiencing the color red. I am experiencing blue. I'm experiencing TV, whatever. So that can't be wrong. I can't not be experiencing the TV, presumably. But that doesn't mean TV is there. So my experience of knowledge would only count as knowledge for my direct experience. And I can't say that my experience of knowledge of the TV would then be able to be applied to my knowledge that the TV is actually there, because that would have to have a different justification other than my direct experience. It seems like the problem of solipsism. Like, so you have direct experience. Can you use the direct experience of knowledge to justify that the external world is there? No. Like that doesn't, because that's the question. That would be begging the question.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I do this. I think this is the only way to defeat people that say, "Oh, this is a virtual world," or "We live in the matrix" and stuff like that. No, we know that the external world is real, and it's directly through this properly basic way. That's what I think. That's the reason most people think it's ridiculous that we live in the matrix or something like that. It's they know that we're not, kind of thing. Now, there are smart people. I've had a professor who actually literally believes we live in a virtual world and stuff like that. So he doesn't have that. But nonetheless, I've experienced knowledge, knowledge through acquaintance in this internalist way caused by my faculties functioning properly, blah, blah, blah. So I know that this is an external world and I can have knowledge in that way. Yeah, when I'm holding up this is not a hallucination. I know that for sure when I'm holding up a pair of sunglasses here. Um, that's, yes, it's possible for me to be hallucinating and stuff like that, but not in this case. This case, I'm having that experience of knowledge in the 100% degree. I know that these sunglasses are actually here and I'm touching them.
So I'm not seeing the connection there. I can see the connection between you have an experience of sunglasses. So your belief that you have an experience of sunglasses can't be wrong. The belief that sunglasses actually exist definitely seems like it could be wrong.
But not if you're having a properly basic belief, right? If you're experiencing knowledge, this is what it's all grounded in. This
I don't know.
experience.
Like, I don't think any belief that you could be having can never affect the truth of the glasses actually existing. You're like the subjective beliefs that you have, none of them in any way could affect the glasses. You could have any combination of beliefs, positively or negatively, and the glasses objectively exist completely independent of the beliefs you have or whether or not you're having them, and none of the beliefs that you have any bearing on the glasses. It's why they're objective.
Yeah, for sure. But my properly basic belief, my experience of knowledge in this way is the same justification that, yes, I'm not just experiencing those sunglasses. Additionally, I also know the proposition that the sunglasses are objective and really exist, external to me. independent of my beliefs and blah blah blah, I also know that in a properly basic way as well.
That seems like a contradiction. You're saying through your internal beliefs, you know they exist independent of your internal beliefs.
Well, no, I mean, I'm saying that when I said that they exist independent of my beliefs, I was talking, okay, let me say it this way. So, through my epistemic beliefs, experience of knowledge, and that sort of thing, I know that my sunglasses exist ontologically independent of my beliefs and stuff like that. I don't know if
Yeah, that
that
seems like a
makes sense.
contradiction. This is like you're using your beliefs through your beliefs. You can know that the sunglasses exist independent of your beliefs.
No, that the beliefs are part of the mechanism. They're the mechanism epistemically or epistemologically as to how I know that the ontological status of my glasses are external, right? So it's
Yeah, that seems to be the contradiction. So your internal mechanism, you're using your beliefs as the mechanism to know that these things are not only in your beliefs.
okay. Okay, so my experience of knowledge, my acquaintance with the knowledge, justifies that my belief that these glasses exist externally.
Yeah, that seems like again really circular. So you're saying like because knowledge is a justified true belief, and you're saying my acquaintance with the belief is the justification. So I have a belief, and the fact that I have the belief is the justification that it's knowledge.
It's the acquaintance with knowledge itself, the experience of knowledge, right? Because remember, there's the warrant. Remember, don't forget that definition of warrant. The faculties, the reliablest condition, they produce these faculties in those contexts produce the properly basic belief, right? This
Um. So
under my
I definitely have problems with that, but let's just go with the definition of knowledge is a justified true belief. True belief.
warranted true belief, yeah.
Justification and warrant are synonymous. You can change them out. It doesn't make a difference. So your experience of which of these, so we're asking about the justification. And you want to say the justification, so justified true belief equals knowledge, and your justification is experience of knowledge.
Oh well, so yeah, if by justification you're accepting Alvin Plantinga's definition of warrant, under that assumption, then yes, knowledge is a warranted true belief, and our beliefs are produced by a set of faculties under the conditions that Plantinga lays out for the definition of warrant, right? That's the reliable faculties functioning properly in a suitable environment and are successfully aimed at producing true beliefs. Those, in turn, on an internalist level, this is where I go beyond Plantinga, produce this irresistible inclination within me with respect to the properly basic belief. And that's the thing that I'm calling the experience of knowledge. I am acquainted with, I know that when the qualities of warrant are fulfilled, I've experienced what that feels like. And that's what I'm calling the experience of knowledge. And on that basis, is this boring or?
So
Yeah.
couldn't we just zap your brain, make you feel that for something false?
No, you
What?
cannot. You cannot, right? And warrant, the definition of warrant itself precludes false beliefs. It's part of the definition itself. You
Well, the
cannot
question, the feeling part was the part I'm focusing on. You said you have
have.
this feeling of knowledge, this acquaintance with knowledge or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And it seems like any feeling you have can be replicated with an electrode in the brain in the right location. You're saying
Uh,
that's false. You're saying there,
that's
this is a special feeling that can't be replicated by an electrode in the brain.
yes.
Okay, I'd say that's just demonstrably false. We could replicate anything in your brain just with electrodes.
Okay. Well, show me the experiment.
Yeah, I'd have to we'd have to locate where this belief is in your brain and then zap that part of the brain to see if you can make it feel about strange things. And I'm sure we could do that. We just have to hook up your brain, like experience this acquaintance with knowledge thingy, and then once we can locate it in the brain, we'll zap it and see, well, are you experiencing it now? But I'm sure we'd be able to do that. But let's go back to the functioning properly thingy. So Plantinga's definition of a warrant is a thing, a belief produced by whatever mechanism you're using that's functioning properly in the right environment or whatever. Yeah. So there's no such functioning properly isn't a real definition. There's no such thing as functioning properly.
Well, sure there is, right? Like it depends how you're defining functionally and functioning properly. And Alvin Plantinga doesn't presuppose an theistic or supernatural God-given end goal or purpose for it, but just means look, our senses are designed to approximate. Our sense of sight is meant to observe objective things in the universe external to us and allows us to survive or whatever you want to say.
Well,
At
yeah,
least
let's say functioning properly is just to produce survival and has nothing to do with correspondence to truth.
yeah, sure. So that's the basis of Plantinga's evolutionary argument against atheism, right? Like it's instead of the faculties being designed to produce true beliefs, they're successfully aimed at producing beliefs with survival value, and on that basis, you can never know anything, right? Because false beliefs are conducive to survival in some contexts. And
Well,
so,
no, I'd say you can still know things based on my definition, but the problem here is that functioning properly could be defined equally either way. There's no preferred definition of functioning properly. It's arbitrary.
well, sure. I mean, the definition that Planting is giving of warrant is he's trying to define what is knowledge, right? So he's saying, I think that knowledge is warranted true belief. And he's saying, if you had warrant under this definition, if you had faculties that actually are designed at producing true beliefs and meet the other conditions, that's sufficient for knowledge. That's what knowledge is. So it's a definitional
Well, that's begging the
thing.
question. If you're saying if we have a belief system that functions to produce true beliefs, like, oh, well, then they're true. Like, yay. But the problem here is that if you're using functions properly and entails functions properly as meaning it does true beliefs in your definition of whether or not you can have knowledge, that's just circular. Like, again, the problem here is that you could define function properly in any way you want, and if you're defining it just including the definition of truth in there, well, then, like, that'd be like saying if I have a mechanism that gives me true beliefs, well, then I have true beliefs. Like, that's cool, but
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, brilliant of you. And Plantinga fully admits that this is as far as his book goes. He's not trying to prove it, and this is why I go beyond him. It's really all based. How do I know that I have got warrant in the sense that Plantinga defines it, with aimed at true beliefs? How do I know that my faculties are aimed at producing true beliefs? And it all goes back down to this experience of knowledge that we've been talking about. That's how I know.
okay,
That's
so we would falsify if we could locate in the brain where you're feeling this experience of knowledge, and we could zap you and make you feel it towards whatever we wanted to. That would falsify your position.
yeah,
Okay, so I would say that that is the more reasonable conclusion based on our current understanding of neurology, psychology, cognitive science, and every field of brain science. That is the more likely thing than that there's the special belief that can't be changed based off of zapping you in the brain. Because if you could do that, that would be really cool. If there's some kind of belief that can't be changed by zapping you in the brain, that would be a very good evidence to refute the current consensus in neurology and naturalism that there's something else about beliefs. So I would be happy to grant that as evidence if you could demonstrate that there was such a thing. I would just say
cool.
that that's contrary to the consensus in the fields and what all the evidence would point. It'd be more reasonable to think the other way.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, I think the next argument, I did want to throw this one in for God. How long do you want to go for, just so I know if I should speed up or keep going
I'm
into?
fine for whenever until I have
Okay.
something to do.
Okay. All right. Cool. So I wanted to get your opinion on an argument for beauty. So this wasn't an argument that played a role in my belief in God at all at the time of my conversion, and it's something that it isn't even developed on me. But I took a philosophy of aesthetics class, so I had to write a paper. So I kind of developed a half baked argument, and I just wanted to get your take on it very quickly. Um, so my argument is basically it's an abductive argument. It's arguing that what I call theistic dispositional realism is the best explanation for the aesthetic facts that we have. And I have 7 facts, or features of the aesthetic world that I think any hypothesis needs to explain. So the first one are aesthetic correctness conditions. So this basically says that aesthetic values and judgments can be correct or erroneous or incorrect in certain ways. And I, yeah, I won't establish them now and until you challenge them or something. But the second is that there are aesthetic value disagreements, and these are not just factual disagreements; they're disagreements of an evaluational type. Um,
Wait,
yeah.
don't we want factual disagreements? Isn't that what would make them correct and incorrect? Because you said so. There's aesthetic correctness conditions. That means they're factual disagreements, right?
So no. So with this second fact, it's not even just factual disagreements. It's of a valuational level. We disagree. Like some people think Picasso's beautiful, other people thinks it's garbage. In the they differ in the evaluations too.
Right, but so you said there's the first property in the first premise in your argument is that there is aesthetic correctness conditions, and the second one is that this is not a factual disagreement, or not only a factual. It would also be factual, right? It has to be
Yeah,
factual to be correct.
yeah. So they're both factual and evaluational differences
Okay,
that
okay,
just on a phenomenological level, right?
gotcha.
Okay. The third one is that there is such a thing as aesthetic refinement or development in education. Um, that's obvious. People go to art school and they refine their aesthetic tastes and stuff like that. The fourth one is that the what I call aesthetic object relevance. So this says that an object's properties are necessary to ground aesthetic values and judgments. Um, Number five, there's only seven here, so don't worry. Number five is that the aesthetic agent is needed. And Tom, we've kind of gone over this, right? Evaluations require an evaluator, a subject to make an evaluation. Number six, I don't know if I should include this one, but I just said that there's a link. Psychologically, it's been proven that within human beings, there's a link between moral values and aesthetic values. So that's just a psychological fact. And then the last one is that there's this phenomenon known as aesthetic non-deference. We as human beings don't want to defer to the aesthetic evaluations of other human beings. We tend not to care about what the art experts say. I think this looks like garbage, or I think this looks great. I don't care what the film critics say. So those are the seven facts that I'm evaluating the various hypotheses on. Do you want me to go into the hypotheses, or do you want to question the facts first, or
I'm not like your argument is that you need to explain these things or something.
yeah, that what I call theistic dispositional realism is the best hypothesis at explaining these compared to others.
Okay, I'm not seeing how. So I think aesthetic correctness would probably be the only one that matters here. Like, I don't think there is an aesthetic correctness. I don't think
Okay.
it's correct to say that the Mona Lisa is more beautiful than any of the other paintings in the Louvre or whatever. Like, that's not, there is no factual that disagreement there. So there is an evaluation disagreement there, but the evaluation is purely subjective. And so that would, as long as I reject those two, that there is aesthetic correctness and that there's a factual disagreement, everything else is explained just by subjective mental states. Like, yeah, evaluation requires mind. We have minds. Agents are needed. That's fine. Moral and aesthetic connection. Like, yeah, people have definitely make a connection between beauty and moral things. They think that the more beautiful you are, the better you are, and that's subconscious biases. We don't like other people's opinions on beauty. Like, yeah, we don't care about other people's opinions on beauty. That's perfectly explained by evolution. What was the fourth one? Objective relevance something.
Oh, the objects, the aesthetic object itself. So the painting of the Mona Lisa is a necessary. Uh, the properties of the object itself are necessary to ground values and judgments aesthetically.
I don't know what that means.
So the properties of the work itself are required to ground our values and judgments, right? We can't. So for example, if you picture one of the arguments from Malcolm Budd, who's a philosopher in aesthetics, he would, or yeah, actually no, Philip Talon. Let me use him. He's a Christian philosopher. He's been on Capturing Christianity show giving this, and he gives an argument saying that the destruction argument, right? So the properties of the object itself are relevant for producing. And I take what's called a causal conception view of aesthetics. So the object itself causes within us, the aesthetic agent, a certain relevant aesthetic experience that grounds the values. And then it also grounds us. It produces a belief in us. This is beautiful. This is ugly. Whatever it is. Without that object, you can't have the same aesthetic value or experience. And the
What
argument
does
I was
that
going
mean?
to
Like something like if we had a hallucination of the object, it wouldn't be able to produce the same experience as the object itself existing.
exactly, yeah, there's a diminishment in value.
Okay, I would say that's probably false. I would disagree with that.
Okay, okay, cool. So just kind of looking at what are the various hypotheses? I'll just quickly go into that. So in the first place, there's something called emotivism. I don't know. I don't want to waste too much of your time. So that just basically says it's the same as immorality. It just says that look, there are no truth or falsity. There are no facts in aesthetics. It's all just an expression of our emotions. That's an unpopular view. Most people don't go for that.
I like
Um,
that one. That one sounds good. Just subjective. There's no. I don't think there's an objective aesthetics in anything.
okay, so you would probably go with aesthetic subjectivism. Just there are true. It's true or it's false that TJump likes the Mona Lisa, and it's true that Dale doesn't like the Mona Lisa. He thinks it's ugly or something. So there are facts, but it's grounded in the subjective judgments of people.
Yep.
That aesthetic subjectivism. Okay, cool. And then on the other side, there are the objectivist things. So this is where there's natural objectivism. They say, well, no, aesthetic values and judgments are solely in the object itself. It's some property like symmetry or proportionality or something like that. I think that both of us would say no. There has to be an agent who makes an evaluative belief and also has the experience that grounds the value. The object can cause the relevant experience, whatever it is. And then there's, other, non-natural, like aesthetic Platonism. I don't think we would go for that. But here's one in the middle. So this is how I'm basing my argument, and I want to compare it to TJump's subjectivism, or at least hear what he thinks. So a lot of atheists. So this is an argument directly from David Hume, and he goes for what's called natural dispositional realism. So he says, well, look, no, the object, it's kind of in the middle of subjectivism and objectivism. The object causes the relevant experience, blah, blah, blah. But he'll say so the objects have what are called dispositional properties. They dispose an aesthetic agent to have the relevant experience or something like that. And who is the relevant agent? Well, it's not just me or Tom Jump. It has to be an ideal judge. So that's the art experts. They've got the training, they've got proper refined tastes and stuff like that. They provide the standard for correctness conditions. If you agree with the art experts, then you are correct. If you disagree with them, then you're incorrect. And that's how they ground aesthetic correctness conditions. So my argument is just saying, well, actually, I think that Hume is right. Dispositional realism is the best naturalists have, but it suffers from some problems like aesthetic non-deference and stuff like that. So I think God, if he was the ideal judge, that's a better explanation. It has all of the benefits of dispositional realism, plus it solves some of the problems that emerge on that front.
Okay, I still think that beauty not being real is the best explanation.
So beauty being subjective, totally subjective.
Yep.
So
Psychological evolution, nothing more.
okay, so I would reject that. I would give sort of a counter thought experiment. Let's picture a serial killer who has a wreath in his backyard full of severed, chopped off heads of his victims, and he makes a subjective judgment. Yeah, that's beautiful to him. He thinks that's great. I think we would want to say no. He is incorrect, and he's not just incorrect on moral grounds, like oh that's immoral. We also say no. He's incorrect to think that such a sight is beautiful. That really is repulsive. So that would be one argument I might offer there.
I would definitely disagree. I think we literally have that. They're called antlers.
Okay, with animals. So
Yeah,
you would
like
agree.
like vegan sees it and says that is disgusting in the same way that you see one with a bunch of babies' heads or whatever as disgusting. And but hunters see it as beautiful, and like I can understand both positions, and it seems purely subjective that yeah, they're killing a bunch of animals, and people who see those animals having been morally significant see that as disgusting and not beautiful, whereas people who think it's a trophy or whatever see it as beautiful. I see no difference between using people's heads and antler heads. I see the beauty is purely subjective to the individual, and both have a justified belief that their subjective experience is that is beautiful, and neither is objectively correct or incorrect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So obviously, I would disagree. I think that there's a huge difference between animals and human beings. Although, even still, even if pretend I'm wrong, pretend they are the exact same. Who cares? There's still, I'm. You would just say that I'm incorrect in my judgment that antlers are beautiful or something. Not that I think it's beautiful, but um, yeah, you would just say that people that think that hunters are incorrect in their judgments and that sort of thing.
Well, I don't think either are incorrect. I don't think a wreath of baby heads and a wreath of antler heads are any more or less beautiful. I think beauty is just a subjective thing humans have made up. It's like any more or less Klingon. Like that item, is that more or less Klingon than that item? Like I don't think there's an objectively correct answer there. I think it's human construction, or which object is more or less Harry Potter esque. Like we can definitely make associations that Harry Potter is a wizarding school, so wands would be more Harry Potter esque than water bottles, but it's just a human subjective thing we've made up. There's no objectively correctness to it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I guess the serial killer thing, I think, should expose that kind of flaw of thinking. It's designed to do that. If it doesn't work in your case, again, you just kind of flat out deny what most people wouldn't, right? I think that most people they wouldn't just morally find that morally repugnant. They would also find it aesthetically ugly, and they would say that there's an objective fact about that. It's incorrect to, as a subject, to see that, to experience valuable, beautifulness when you see a sight like that of severed human heads or something. So
Well, I
yeah.
would think like modern art would be a better example. Like most people think modern art is stupid, and I agree, modern art is stupid, but I don't think it's objectively less beautiful. Like I think that just our understanding of art being just a subjective human thing is pretty well established in most artistic fields. Like I don't think there's an objective beauty standard. I don't think there's any reason to think there's an objective beauty standard.
Okay, well, let me ask this then, because you said you would accept fact three about aesthetic development and refinement,
Sure.
which David Hume. So that would suggest there's an objective standard, isn't there? Because otherwise it would just be
No.
lateral changes. I liked this at time one, I don't like it at time two, but this implies there's some kind of vertical improvement going on. So there is a standard.
Yeah, but the standard could still be subjective, so you're improving by your own standard. It wouldn't be an objective improvement. So like I think that my cooking has gotten better. Is that objective? No. But it is to me because I refine things based off of my subjective tastes. And so beauty standards can be the same thing where I refined my beauty standard based off of other criteria that I prefer or dislike or whatever. And so I can still have aesthetic refinement without having any objective aesthetic measure.
Okay, so do you admit that there are aesthetic experts?
Um, like people with degrees, I guess, but there's no objective truth there.
So they're in terms of their education and refinement, is there any sense in which you should defer to them?
Nope.
Um,
Zero reasons to defer. That's the last one you said, the why people don't care
yeah,
about opinions on
not
beauty. Like there's zero reason to listen to art experts on art.
gotcha.
Like if you like a sculptor made by your kid better than Picasso, then it's better than Picasso.
Gotcha. So okay, so you would definitely disagree with David Hume, where he does kind of recognize that there are these correctness standards, and they're grounded in one's level of development, one's qualifying as an ideal judge. So yeah, again, when it just comes down to your level of just straight out just deny, no, just claim everything's subjective and that there is no objective standard, I don't really have a way to prove that apart from in the same way we do with proving objective moral values, which we've already been through property based beliefs, and also refuting relativistic standards as being wrong in some way, through like reformers' dilemmas or in the way that I attempted to do with the serial killer and that sort of thing. Um, okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Is it other than denying the
Yeah, we can take the other approach and say, even if we grant moral or beauty is objective, would a god be the best explanation for it versus like a platonic beauty or something?
yeah, or compare it to like Hume's natural dispositional realism, because that's what I'm saying. I think he provides the best theory naturalistically, and then theistic thing does better than that.
Yeah, since I don't think it's real. I don't really understand Hume's position there. But let's say it is real for the sake of an argument. Why would theism be better than any other non-theistic explanation?
Yeah. So in the first place, I think that in terms of the facts, let me just bring it up again. All right. So I think number one, it does way better on number seven, right? Aesthetic non-deference, as you yourself have proven here. You don't care about any humans or art experts at all. The opinions are totally meaningless to you, and to a large degree, I think that that's true of me and most people as well. Although we do defer to them on factual matters, I think that their education does allow them to explain the context of a painting or how it was made and stuff. And this does have some relevance aesthetically in terms of the value as well. But God does better than appealing to art experts in this way, because we have a reason that we ought to defer to God's judgments and God's aesthetic values.
Wait, so are we just explaining why we don't like authorities or something? Because so the point of the 7 points that you listed is that these need to be explained under the hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
So we could explain under hypothesis that evolution, we prefer our own subjective biases over others' subjective biases. That seems perfectly coherent as an explanation of point 7. Why would the existence of point 7 be better explained under theism?
Okay, so sorry, say that again. I missed.
Well, so the goal is to explain these 7 points, and you're saying theism better explains these 7 points, and the 7th point is that we don't like authorities' opinions on beauty. Like, okay, but that seems to be perfectly well explained under evolution. We don't like anybody's authority over ours, typically. So I don't see why this would be better explained if there was a God, the fact that we don't like other people's opinions.
It's, well, with evolutionary mechanisms, so that's more of an objective thing, right? Like you're saying that there's some kind of property, right, that's conducive to survival value or something. It depends which hypothesis you take. So the mainstream one is natural selection or something like that. It contributes to natural selection in some way, and to our survival. But even Charles Darwin himself admitted that that's not true. So he had to invent something else, right? Like, as a matter of fact, scientifically speaking, these features are evolutionary costly in terms of their survival value. Like the peacock's feathers harm it in terms of its survivability or something like that. And it's not something that would come up through natural selection. So this is why Darwin invented something called sexual selection, or more modern biologists come up with what's called null theory. Okay, you're not.
Well, so I'm not seeing the relevance here. So we don't like other people's opinions on beauty. Yeah, that seems like explainable under evolution just fine. Like, why would I care what that person's position on beauty is? Why would I have a tendency to agree with them on beauty?
Well, I was trying to defeat your claim that evolution could be an equal explanation there. I was saying it can't, given what we know. It doesn't explain it. In fact, the evidence counts against at least that version of the hypothesis being true, the natural selection thesis.
Well, through natural selection, the random mutation causes us to have a disposition for different dispositions and think different things are beautiful. So I think that's beautiful. He thinks that's beautiful. I don't care about his opinion. I don't necessarily go for what he's going for. I don't see how this wouldn't be explained under evolution just through random mutation. We have different things of beauty, and we value the things that we see are beautiful, which would be a product of random mutation to result in a differentiation of species. It would be one of the key features of evolution. Why would this not be explained by evolution?
Well, like I said, so if you're taking it depends which thesis you're going for, but I'm assuming you're taking the standard natural selection
Sure.
hypothesis rather than a something else. So it does. So in number one, it's improbable to be the explanation for aesthetic values and judgments because it's counterproductive. It goes against survivability, like the peacock's bright feathers and stuff like that. And this is why evolutionists, even Charles Darwin himself, said that no, there has to be some other mechanism, like what he called sexual selection, or what Richard Prum calls null theory, or something. And basically, what some scientists are arguing, Richard Crum is who I'm appealing to, and I'm in the minority here. The consensus is on your side on this, just to be upfront. But he says, no, look, we don't select people. Beauty is an indicator of health. This is why people are attracted to beautiful people. Oh, you'll give me more healthy offspring. This is the standard natural selection thesis. But Richard Prum proves he's an expert in birds, and he proves that look, no, for human beings and birds, actually beauty is fundamental. It's a fundamental quality for why we select our sexual partners, and that's one of the reasons. It's not just this. Oh well, you're beautiful, therefore you're healthy. Now I'm attracted to you. No, beauty is a fundamental attractor in terms of our sexual selection and stuff like that. So that's denied by your thesis and it's not true to our aesthetic experience.
Right, so I definitely deny that in the thesis. I would say that it's simply a product of what makes evolution work. A system that has a randomness feature will be able to produce more positive mutations than one that doesn't have a randomness feature. So, one, like, a guy just did a video on gerrymandering and how to build the correct system of gerrymandering. And if you have a larger randomness value that accepts random garbage through, it has a more likely outcome to produce a more accurate map because it can make larger changes that can be tested against previous changes. If you're only allowed to change very, very specific things, there are less changes that can occur, and you have a system that dies out and doesn't produce good results. So having a randomness variable like beauty selection, having it not be as centralized, will have a much better evolutionary advantage than one that has one that is centralized. Therefore, it's more likely to have one that is decentralized and have disagreement on beauty.
Well, so I guess I would just say that human beings are a lot more unified when it comes to their aesthetic judgments and beauty than you seem to be implying. It's not this totally random process. So another view of the evolutionary thing is called the biophilia hypothesis. Rather than natural selection or mate selection, they say, look, aesthetic values, they're grounded in habitat
Right.
selection.
So I'm not saying that look everyone's is completely different. I'm saying that there needs to be a variable where you can disagree with the majority and go in a different direction to produce randomness. Otherwise, it is too constrained, and the amount of diversity that you see is too limited to produce a positive outcome. So there has to be a variable that can go against the standard whatever variables that are used, and whatever that randomness variable is would be something that whatever is selected would supersede all of the other variables like authority or the culture or health or whatever. This randomness variable is going to have to overcome all of those. And
Gotcha.
so there is this randomness variable in our desires of beauty or whatever. You happen to think this is beautiful, and because it is the random variable, it's going to be something that's more important to you than all the other variables, and you're going to reject everyone else's opinion, just like in any other system of establishing what is the best system to like do the gerrymandering. You have to have that randomness variable for the exact same reason, because it would produce a better outcome than without the randomness variable. And so beauty could be the randomness variable, and that would be a perfectly reasonable way to explain why we have disagreement.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that is what people that go for the natural selection thing will try to say. I would just say that it seems improbable to me, given that it's evolutionarily costly. It seems implausible, and also it's very ad hoc. Everything you're saying, you have these just so type things that would have come into place just to explain the facts that we see it. So I think those are kind of the fundamental objections I would give to your what you would get there.
Well, I definitely say it wouldn't be ad hoc. Like this is like if we test different models of like gerrymandering and we see which models create the best results, it's the ones that have this randomness variable in it. And so it would be reasonable that these models are things that we see occurring in biology all the time. They create very similar models as to our statistical models. So it's reasonable that a similar property would come about through evolution. And for humans, beauty could be that thing. There wouldn't be a contradiction there. So it seems like that's actually very likely. We see these happen in bacteria all the time with the random directional things where they just go off in a direction, find the food source, then everything else dies and they just go towards the food source. Like this randomness variable is a really common thing in evolution. So the fact that beauty would be one of these features or a result of these features doesn't seem to be ad hoc at all. It seems to be kind of standard.
Gotcha. Okay, let me ask this then. This is a feature number six, if you were writing it down, and this kind of speaks against evolutionary hypothesis as well as I'm interested. I think this is a benefit for the theistic version, but there is this proven psychological link between moral values being associated closely with aesthetic values. There are these psychological correlations that have been proven almost universally among all humans. So, why would that be the case? Why would there, if we just evolved, or if aesthetic subjectivism is true, it doesn't seem that we would have this correlation. Whereas with God, the theistic version, no, it makes perfect sense. God exists a se, all moral values are grounded in him, aesthetic values are grounded in him, and he designed human beings to reflect him both morally and aesthetically. So it explains that fact, I think, better than naturalism could.
I would say that the same reason that logical decisions are contingent on emotion. Like if without emotion you can't make logical decisions, that's a well-known fact in neurology. Once your emotional centers are damaged, you just can't make any decision at all. It's because that function of the brain is essentially just the same thing doing multiple features, multiple functions. So it wouldn't.
I didn't know that. So cool.
But yeah, so like it wouldn't be hard to think that if you're establishing like beauty and goodness are both establishing some kind of a better metric, this thing is better than that thing. And since it's the same essential function, that they're connected in such a way that the same part of the brain would be doing the same function in both cases makes a great deal of sense. Just like how different parts of our body could be doing similar functions in related to DNA or mitochondria or other different body features. Like it seems like it's just moral and aesthetic developments are both ancestors of a common ancestor, which was the brain's ability to make those judgments of some greater or lesser extent.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's an interesting take. And again, I would just throw out the ad hocness for that. I think I see it as ad hoc. I know you deny it, but
Well, why would you see that as ad hoc? Like, because if that's a very well-known phenomenon in evolution that happens quite often, and you say, well, what could explain this, and it seems to fit that phenomenon quite well, that doesn't seem like it'd be ad hoc. That seems like what caused the footprint in the snow? It was probably a horse, because we have horses there. Oh, look, there's horses over there. It seems like that wouldn't be ad hoc. That would be induction.
it's okay. So yeah, sorry. I think you kind of cut out a bit. You're saying it's an inductive argument. If the horse print's there and we see a bunch of horses, yeah, we reason that a horse probably made the horse hoof. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So the same thing would be
Um,
like if we see moral and aesthetic judgments both as a result of a similar process in the brain, then the similar process in the brain, they're both common ancestors of a previous. There was a previous common ancestor that both of those parts or mental processes we're resulting from seems like a reasonable conclusion, because that's a thing that happens a lot, that we see a lot, just like we see horses a lot. So there's a thing we can't explain, or we don't know what the explanation is. Here is a process in evolution that happens a whole bunch that could explain that thing. I don't
Okay.
think it'd be ad hoc, it'd just be induction.
Yeah, so I would just the reason I said I think it's ad hoc is I don't think that we have any evidence for the type of thing that links or correlates values with each other, like aesthetic value or moral values and that sort of thing. So maybe you have examples of something else, like a common structure has a common ancestor. Like what? Okay, well maybe if you give me an example, what is this common ancestor of moral values and aesthetic values that you're talking?
The mental ability to make evaluations.
The mental ability to make evaluations. And okay, so it's how do you know? So you're just kind of making up that's prior to these things, right? There's no evidence that we had, and before we had moral evaluations or aesthetic evaluations, what was our evaluations of? It was purely just epistemic. What was the faculty's role at that time?
Hunger, not hunger. Be a
So
fight,
like,
fight or flight.
gotcha. So simple, like epistemic kind of things. Okay. Um, so yeah, I think it for me the reason I would just label it ad hoc is that there's no evidence. It's just a non-evidence assumption that this faculty was in this state prior to and gave rise to more moral and aesthetic values. Like I don't think that's evidenced. I think that's just you making well, this makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, yeah, because I'm hypothesizing here. So this is currently just me making stuff up. It's probably a pretty good theory, so I think I probably could find something on it. But if we compare this theory to God theory, this theory has more evidence because it's built on things that do have a basis. Like all of the features of my theory that I'm presenting have a good empirical basis in evolution, whereas all of the features of your theory do not have an empirical basis. So my theory would be preferred.
Gotcha. All right, perfect. All right, cool. So I wanted to fit in. So we've been talking about arguments for God's existence and that sort of thing in general. But I know that you were interested in well, why am I a Christian specifically? Why a Christian theist? And this is why I wanted to make sure we had time to throw in kind of my notion about how we identify miracles in the first place, just in general. If we can go over that,
Sure.
and then maybe discuss like a practical example from the Shroud of Turin, which is one of the four positive evidences I based my decision, my faith to come to Christ in. So, all right, cool. So, in terms of identifying miracles in general, I think that this whole supernatural versus natural divide is a complete misnomer. It's an enlightenment concept that's not helpful and that sort of thing. It just kind of turns people's brains off from even considering it and that sort of thing. So I prefer approaching the identification of miracles through a lens of intelligent design. Did God design this event or not to happen? And along those lines, I like William Dembski's specified complexity. So if an event is complex in a specific way or it's improbable in a certain way, and it is accompanied by the criterion of specification, it has an independent uh, it conforms the event conforms to an independent pattern, a detached pattern or something like that, then we can conclude an intelligent designer is behind the event. So I kind of use a bastardized version of Dembski's criteria here. So when we try to identify miracles, philosophers like Swinburne, Gary Habermas, all of them say there's essentially three ingredients, right? Number one, it's got to be, you have to prove the event happened or whatever it is. Number two, you have to prove the event is extraordinary or improbable, or to use Dembski's terms, complex in a certain way. The third one is there has to be that element of specification. So this is where philosophers throw in, well, there's got to be the religious context, and that makes a difference. If you have all three of those ingredients, you can say, yeah, this is probably a miracle. So my specific versions of that. So I kind of came up with an 11 premise argument, which I won't go into, but just understand my criteria fit into an 11 premise argument. Um, But it basically says, look, I agree that there's the first criterion. We have to prove that the certain event happened or occurred or whatever it is. But then we also have to prove to a reasonable person. That's my standard. A reasonable person, the legal definition, an average person, average intelligence, average wisdom, blah, blah, blah. This is my standard. Would be rationally justified, so not warranted, but just justified, and think that the event is an extraordinary event. And the way I go about proving that is, so there's number one, the event has to be unique to extraordinary contexts. And I defined extraordinary context as anything that's outside of well-established, currently well-known, natural theories or scientific laws and stuff like that, or scientific mechanisms and that sort of thing. So that's my definition. That includes a lot. That can include aliens. It can include ghosts. It includes natural anomalies and that. So it's a very watered down standard here. And so that's my uniqueness thing. It has to be unique. The event has to be unique only to those types of contexts. And then secondly, in addition, a reasonable person would also have to say that it's probably not the result of ordinary natural mechanisms.
Wait, go back. So it has to be unique, like ghosts, or what is the uniqueness thing for? Why does it have to be unique? What is this?
So it's a falsification criterion. It has to be unique to what I call these extraordinary contexts, right? So if we have an event, like say we have it's a common argument with Jesus' resurrection. Oh, he appeared to groups, 12 people.
Is this just your definition of miracle? It has to be a unique event.
So yeah, it's a criteria that I use to identify that an event is extraordinary in the way I define. So it's one of the factors that goes into that. So criterion A, you have to prove the event happened. Criterion B, you have to prove that a reasonable person would think they're extraordinary. How do we think that it's extraordinary? Well, the first step is it has to be unique to certain contexts.
Okay, gotcha.
Make sense? Okay. Um, in addition to that, not only does it have to be unique to extraordinary contexts, there also has to be some reason to think it's improbable that what I call ordinary natural mechanisms can explain it. So once again, that can be by proving the uniqueness of the event, but this time there's a qualification. So it's unique. Sorry, is this too much, or I'm just going by your facial expression? So yeah.
Improbable that ordinary mechanisms can explain it. Like, I'm not seeing the difference between that and being extraordinary.
Well, this is a way to prove that it is extraordinary, right? So it's unique to that context, despite there having been sufficient opportunity for the event to have been duplicated in a naturalistic context. This is one way that I have of proving that a reasonable person would think it's improbable that ordinary natural mechanisms alone is a equal explanation for it.
Okay, let's skip the criteria. Go into like an example of what is like how is this? Give me an example of a miracle and reason we have to accept it.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just say this then. So an example is the formation of the images on the Shroud of Turin, and the way I evaluated all miracles, including this one, is that it conforms to these criteria that I've laid out. So yeah, I guess just one last general thing to say then. If I won't go through the criteria if it's too much, but so number one, it conforms to those criteria, and secondly, I'm warranted in believing that that is proof from God in the context of my 11 premise argument, because I twist the skeptical argument from confusion and say that God could not allow an event that fulfills these criteria. Part of it is that it's within a religious context where it's authenticating religious message, and the event is not subsumable to another religion. So, like the virgin birth, Muslims claim the virgin birth, or with Moses parting the Red Sea, Christians also believe in that. So it can't be subsumable. There has to be a way to tell who gets the miracle and that sort of thing. If those criteria are fulfilled by a certain event, and that religion is false, or God doesn't want us to follow that religion, that results in undue confusion. Therefore, we know that he wouldn't allow for something like the Shroud of Turin to fulfill these things.
Okay, so radiocarbon dating on the Shroud of Turin shows that with a 95% accuracy, it was dated between like 1200 and 1300 AD, 1400 AD.
Okay, so on to the Shroud of Turin then. Okay, so that's true, right? I've linked to the paper itself, but it's totally false. First of all, the 95% degree of certainty is false, and I can scientifically, it's been mathematically proven.
Well, right. The below it says that the 95% accuracy to hold the 95% accuracy, you need to add 88 years. So okay, I did that. So I said 1200 to 1400. So I added the 88 years.
Okay, so they fudged the data. This is a scientifically proven fact. Harry Gov, the radiocarbon scientist in charge of it, admitted this in his 1996 book. They got a total of 16 values, and the paper that you're looking at excludes 4 of the outliers there. So statistically, if you use the chi-square analysis test, and I can link to the papers here, it's multiple peer-reviewed papers that admit this, including in Nature later on. But the statistics, there's such a variation. If you include the outliers in that, there's such a variation. I think it's like 400 years or something. Again, I'll need to reconfirm, but it's 400 years within a span of 4 centimeters if you include the outliers. So that means you can't get the 95% degree of confidence, and it's an international statistic standards. If you have anything less than 95% degree of confidence, the results are garbage. You can't trust them. You're not justified in using those results. No mathematician in the world will deny that. It's a chi-square test that they used, and that's why.
P-values can get a lot less than that. That's not a big deal. But the most recent analysis, 2020, concludes that the stated date range needs to be adjusted by 88 years in order to meet the 99% confidence. The most recent analysis, 2020, says that that number is still correct if you add 88 years to the projected dates, which I did.
Right. So the outliers themselves. So I don't know what paper you're looking at, but
Riani, Marco, Atkinson,
gotcha,
Turin statistics, the just the ones listed on the bottom of the Wikipedia where it's literally just stating all this stuff.
gotcha. Okay, so the outliers themselves fall within the medieval range. We never got a carbon date value that's first century AD, right? So I think that's what the people you're looking at are talking about. But in terms statistically, to get that 95% degree of confidence in the results that they had, they conducted a chi-square test, and they deleted the outliers to fit that international standard. And Bob Rucker, who's an expert, he's a nuclear engineer and that sort of thing, who worked for the government for years. He's one person who calculated and has mathematically proven, without doubt, with 96 point something percent degree of confidence, that the results that the carbon 14 scientists got were the result of not measurement error that the carbon 14 scientists just assumed it was. It's systemic bias or systemic error, and that's based on the what's the word I'm looking for, the range of dates. If you include all 16 that they got, it's statistically impossible for that date to be correct. There's some kind of systemic bias at play, and that's been mathematically proven.
All of the hypotheses used to challenge the radiocarbon dating have been scientifically refuted.
False.
Professor Christopher Ramsey, Oxford Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit, 2008. Yep. Radiocarbon Dating, second edition in archaeology perspective by R.E. Taylor, offered use of something. Rutgers, 2016. Oh, you can take it up with them. I'm going to go with those guys because I don't really. The image is kind of dumb anyway. Like, it doesn't even. It's like. It looks like it was painted on. Like, a face wouldn't look like that if it was actually laying on a face. So.
So with the carbon 14, are you interested? Like, if I send you stuff privately, will you? And I know the experts on both sides and stuff like that, right? I know Christopher Ramsey and stuff like that. I know I'm having Hugh Ferry, the world's famous shroud skeptic, on my show in a couple weeks. So
I'm not interested enough to actually like spend
Okay,
hours researching this route of Turin. No, it's not something that I take
fair enough.
seriously.
Fair enough.
But, but yeah, like
So
I
I would
don't
just
think
say
so.
there have been over 2 dozen every forensic expert who's actually seen the Shroud Man disagrees with you. There's not a single one who studied the cloth itself and says, yeah, this is just ridiculous nonsense. And I'm not talking believing Christians, right? I'm friends with pro shroud expert Barry Schwartz. He's not a believer, he's not a Christian, he's Jewish, and he doesn't believe the shroud images are miraculous in any way. He does believe, on the basis of scientific evidence, that it belonged to Jesus. We can prove that this covered the historical Jesus, or at the very least, it's scientifically proven that it covered a real human corpse. Um, so yeah, and he's not the only one. I mean, there was lots. He was a member of what's called STIRP in 1978, which is the only scientific team in history that actually investigated the images back in 1978, and he was the official photographer and stuff, and he was friends with all of the scientists. So every forensic expert, Dr. Robert Buckland, he's the guy they invented the show Quincy after back in the 70s or whatever, right? Frederick Zugby, these are all world class medical experts. All of them agree that, yeah, this covered a human corpse and it's obviously not a fake just from looking at the images.
I just corpse CORP corpse. Nope, can't find it. So all of the different explanations involve not real. I don't see a single one, a single reference anywhere on the wiki saying it was real.
You talk, what are you talking about? Like the raw, you're saying I'm making up the scholars that I'm mentioning, or?
I can't find them on the most common sources of information with hundreds of little references here that is actually real. Like,
Okay, go to shroud.com. That's the number one website that should pop up. It has all of the scholarly writings on both sides. This is not just a pro shroud website. It's run by Barry. He's got all of those articles that I referenced and more. He's also got a section with actual scientific peer reviewed journals from the STIRP team, all proving what I'm saying, including famous secular scientific journals. You can see all 28 of those papers. I think there's 26 from STIRP, and then there's a couple others there.
yeah, I'm pretty solid with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is
Thanks.
reliable to a very high extent. The sources on it are fairly accurate. So I think this is a would be an accurate representation of the consensus view on the topic.
Uh, well, what do you mean by consensus? In terms of the carbon 14, yes, it's the consensus among carbon 14 scientists that they think it's medieval. They think that the dates are correct. So I'm in the minority there. But the majority of carbon 14 scientists have no idea what they're talking about. They weren't involved in the dating or have any idea about the data. They're just making an assumption. So their opinions are worthless, right? In terms of the forensic experts, I would say no, that's wrong. The majority of experts who've actually studied the Shroud Man all agree that it's anatomically correct.
Yeah, I don't see that. It seems like the literally the shape of the face is wrong if it was actually on a face. If because if you put a piece of cloth on a face and you lift it up, it'll be a circle shape, not a. It won't be the actual shape of a face. It looks like it was painted on.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's okay. So yes, there are some anatomical distortions or something like that. And I think what you're saying is if it was covering
Ah,
the
here it
face,
is. Found it.
it's wraparound effect, right?
Gregory S. Paul. Paul stated that the face and proportions of the shroud image are impossible. That the figure cannot represent that of an actual person, and that the posture was inconsistent.
Okay. Well, see, it's hard to. Let me just say that, like I said, the majority of experts who've seen it, he's wrong. Plain and simple. I can state that with authority and prove it if I can cite the peer reviewed papers that prove that this is wrong. Now, there are certain anatomical inaccuracies, and that's due to various effects of tenting on the shroud cloth, how it was wrapped, and that sort of thing. It also depends on the mechanism process. How are the images formed and what that might have entailed, right? So if we're assuming there was a supernatural body or something like that, that is it. You're
I mean,
not
yeah,
taking.
that's technically possible. So yeah, if there's a supernatural way to do it, then it's possible. But no natural means could have accomplished it. That's for sure.
Well, I can cite experts. It's been statistically studied and computer analyzed by modern computers as well, verifying that the proportions of the man on the shroud, while not perfect, are definitely caused by a human corpse or body being in that shroud. It could not be as artistically created, and nobody believes this. Like you actually think it was
Well, all of the
painted?
ones I'm reading say, yeah, it's artistically created, that the blood stains couldn't have happened. They must have happened on separate instances, so it couldn't have been that way. The shapes of the arms are in the wrong positions. They're not anatomically possible. Like all the different things I'm reading, just going through the wiki say, yeah, no, this is not actually physically possible. It must have been painted. Painting it is pretty much the only way that this could have occurred.
Okay, well let me okay, so let me just say, so with respect to the anatomical things, it's what you're saying is not true, and I'll provide, if your audience goes to my website, I'll provide detailed sources they can read for themselves. Now it is true that, okay, with the arms or something, it's he was in rigor mortis, and some people say his arms were dislocated, and that's why it's slightly off. There's nothing in there that falsifies that a human body covered the corpse. There's nothing wrong with the face or something like that. That's perfectly consistent with a human being. But maybe you think it was painted. So let me try to
Well, the
address
arms
that.
are too long and different lengths,
Right.
and that the distance from the eyebrows to the top of the head are is non-representative. It's the wrong proportions of a human head. They
Let,
conclude that the features can be explained if the shroud is a work of Gothic artist, because they are the same as here's a bunch of pictures of Gothic art that has the exact same features.
Gotcha. So let me just say that that is scientifically false, and I can prove it with my sources. I know that my word means nothing to you, and because you won't look into it, but your audience will confirm, and maybe they'll get back to you and say, yeah, Dale is not just lying and not just saying stuff. That what you just read is wrong. Let me take the painting though. Let me say something about the painting hypothesis, because nobody believes that today. And let me explain why. So there's certain features, like I said, Stirp studied.
Well, this is
They
from 2018, the source I'm reading about this, so maybe it's changed in 3 years. It's possible.
No, it's just it's not okay. We'll let people check out. I've got sources that back me up, and it's science. The science doesn't lie, right? So if you believe science, you'll believe me, and not just a quote on Wikipedia. But
Well, I mean, this is scientific papers. Like 2018, an experiment on bloodstain patterns analysis was performed. The study shows that the blood flows from the wounds of the crucified person to compare to the evidence of the Shroud of Turin. The comparison between the different tests demonstrated that the blood patterns on the forearms and on the back of the hand are not connected and would have to occur at different times. So they couldn't separate things. Couldn't work.
right, and so Luigi Garlashelli is the guy who wrote that. I've linked to the peer-reviewed article as well as the peer-reviewed articles refuting that nonsense, because he did experiments. It's not even close to what an actual person, what Jesus would have been through in hypovolemic shock. He would have been dehydrated and all of this. The consistency of the blood that they used in their test was not accurate. It was basically just red water, not like blood at all, let alone one from someone in hypovolemic shock. They used a plastic mannequin that would not at all be the consistency of the skin of someone who had been crucified. So there are flaws in the methodology that I'm saying that they're basing their conclusions on, and I've linked to all this. So the BPA analysis has been refuted. It's not, it doesn't falsify that the shroud was there. But I want to get to the painting, because you asked about the painting. So I have 100% knowledge that that's false. It's been scientifically falsified. How do I know that? So, like I said, Stirp did their study in 1978. They found various features of the shroud. Just like I had those aesthetic facts, I have shroud image features that I base my argument on, right? So number one, just refuting there was no paint found on the shroud
Oh,
incident.
yeah. Just to clarify, I didn't mean like literal painting. Painting, as in, could have been any of the things like using acid or uh,
Gotcha.
dust or medieval stuff or using reliefs. Like it wasn't. I didn't literally mean literal painting.
Okay. 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 So in that case, I can't. So I would just say here are some facts, and I'll list just some of them, because I've done an Excel sheet where I list off all of them. But okay, so here are some facts. So there's photographic negativity. The images are photographic negatives, or at the very least quasi negatives. There's also what's called body image uniformity. So the intensity of the color on each fibril is colored separately, and they have the same intensity of color. This is body image uniformity. And I'll leave it at that for that one. Also, the both sides of the body image have the same image density in terms of the color. So the back side as well as the front side are about the same density or darkness of color. Um, there's three-dimensional information encoded on the shroud in terms of the frontal and dorsal image, and the face is the most realistic of all. Also, there's vertically mapped wrapping distortion. So whatever formed the images on the shroud had to either be ejected from the body or from the image producing object, straight line vertically, rectilinear, or curvilinear, and or so this is partly where some of the distortions come in. I think that the body disappeared and the cloth collapsed into the resultant neutron flux or radiation and stuff like that that caused the image. Okay.
That's one of the, I think, the conspiracy theories listed at the bottom, the extremist theories or something.
That
Radiation.
the cloth collapse.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, you'd have to take that up with somebody who actually has an interest in studying the Shroud of Turin, because it's not really something I'm that interested in. But let's say, so there's a piece of cloth with the face on it. Why is this evidence of anything?
Well, like I said, because it has these scientifically proven features, physical and chemical features on the shroud image. And these features allow me to conclude that they are extraordinary images. All naturalistic hypotheses that you mention either provably cannot explain them, or theoretically we know that they are improbable to work in certain ways. They could not explain all of the physical and chemical features on the shroud. So this makes it extraordinary to a reasonable person in that way. Also, it is unique. Despite sufficient opportunity, people have done lab experiments and field experiments in Jerusalem trying to reproduce these features. They all fail. To this day, they can't even get close to duplicating all of the features. They claim to duplicate some features, but they can't get it all into one cloth, and that sort of thing. So
What are the supernatural features of the cloth?
so I was saying body image uniformity. It encodes three-dimensional information from the body.
Like, what does that mean? So, because it's not uniform. Like, we can just measure the arms; they're not the same length. But
The color, like the images are made up of degraded cellulose, right? So that's the yellow color of the body images. That's what they're made of.
so the color is the same color balance across the entire piece of cloth. That's the supernatural evidence.
Yeah, so that's one of the image features, right? That it. So, for example, that would be impossible with painting to explain, right? It helps us rule out. Another thing is there's no dry powder on the shroud. This is just a physical feature that rules out certain, like Garla Shelley's hypothesis with or powder rubbing type methods, right? Because there would always be this.
Well, keep in mind that I don't really have any interest or desire in the shroud itself. But what you're just saying is there's a bunch of, it doesn't have powder on it, and it has the same color across the whole thing. Like, to a regular person, if you're just telling this to a regular person, like, no one's going to find this spectacular or extraordinary. It's like, cloth with no dust. So, like, for your own standard of this being something that a regular human would find extraordinary, which part of that would be extraordinary?
Well, it's so in the first place, I wasn't able to give all of the features, right? So it's all of the features combined, and then they're extraordinary in the sense that they can't be explained, or probably, a reasonable person would say that they probably can't be explained using solely naturalistic explanations. And the various features I'm giving, so I gave, it's an unremarkable thing. There's no dry powder on it, but that's relevant when we're talking about artistic methods that use dry powder and stuff like that.
Well, let's compare, like, if a pyramid popped out of the sky, like just in the middle of New York, and just landed, like, and we said, well, what caused that? Now that's pretty spectacular. Anybody would say like, yeah, that's pretty amazing. None
Yep,
of the known natural causes would cause that, and so, but we still wouldn't conclude like
for sure. Yeah,
supernatural of anything. We just say
yeah.
probably an unknown natural thing. We have no idea what caused this. But
Well,
all you seem to be saying is that there's a colored difference on a piece of cloth, and there's no dust on the cloth, and it has these it's funny shape.
it's superficial as well. It's on three levels. That'll rule out a whole host of mechanisms. It's not just superficial on the fabric level, it's superficial on the thread level. So each thread is made up of like 200 fibrils. It's only in the top two or three fibrils. On each fibril, it's superficial on the fiber level. It's only in the primary cell wall, the coloring. That rules out paint. Impossible. No, that would capillary flow would happen and it would sink down and stuff into the deeper into the cloth and stuff like that. So like the superficiality, that's another feature that rules out a whole bunch of other explanations. But you're right that with your pyramid example, looking at it more generally, yes, I would qualify that as extraordinary. That's an extraordinary event. But my qualifications aren't just that it happened and that it's extraordinary. There's also that religious context as the third criterion, whereby the event itself is sufficiently attached to a religious message and it serves to attest to the truth of that religious message, and it's not subsumable to any other to the truth, authenticating the truth of any other religious message.
Unless it
uh,
has nothing to do with Jesus at all.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, like if it's just a shroud of a different guy, it wasn't Jesus.
Oh, well, yeah. So this is where I would get into criterion C, and I evaluate in my 300-page document on the shroud. I say I provide the warrant for how it fulfills this, right? So obviously, it's meant to look like Jesus of the Gospels. It includes various wounds, his crown of thorns. These are not things that are typical. His wound in the side, for example. So even if you think it's a fake, pretend it's an artistic fake, it's just obvious that it's meant to portray. It's attached to the Jesus of the Christian Gospels. Um, you would deny that, or
Um, Maybe. Like I'm happy to grant that. Again, I haven't looked at it at all, but it doesn't seem like this is particularly special. Like saying that there is a piece of cloth that has things that don't seem to follow the current patterns of known artistry or whatever doesn't really mean anything to me. Like we don't know how different ways of like the climate, the temperature, the humidity, different things could affect it in different ways. We have no idea. Just the way, in order to establish that it was impossible for this to be done by any natural means, we would have to know like literally everything that happened to it in every climate it was in, and because there's inevitably going to be ways to recreate it naturally without any supernatural means. If your argument is that it's literally impossible to create it with supernatural means or by natural means, I would say that's probably false. We'll probably be able to find different ways to create the similar things, no problem.
well, remember with criterion B, where I'm establishing the extraordinariness, right? I have very watered down standards here. I'm saying that a reasonable person, so that's the legal definition, average person, blah blah blah, they could reasonably conclude that it's improbable or is extraordinary in this way. And I think that by showing it's outside of currently well established scientific mechanisms and that are well known and well established, that's enough to show that it's extraordinary. But that's not the end of my argument.
Right, right. That's the part I'm refuting. That's the part I'm disagreeing with. I'm saying a reasonable person would conclude that if we look at the history of the shroud, that there is most likely going to be a very common, very easy, naturalistic way to explain all of the phenomenon that we just don't know because we just don't know the history of the shroud. So I'd say it's like if we look at any random painting, we can find it has very particular properties to it and try to. The attempt to recreate its exact properties would be extremely difficult for any piece of artwork. It would be essentially impossible. But we can say that, yeah, this is probably something we know how it could occur, like logically possibly given natural means. And we could probably figure it out without much effort. And I think that's essentially what I would take with the shroud is that, yeah, all of the different things that it has very specific properties is no different than the specific properties of any other piece of cloth that's that old, and that we could essentially just try to guesstimate, or that it's no more special than any other cloth, and that we could just guesstimate natural causes of what could do that. There's nothing special about it from what I can see.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like obviously I'm just going to disagree with that. Just I know this kind of thing in depth from my. I would just yeah, I guess I would just say that it definitely a reasonable person would conclude that it's extraordinary in the sense that I defined. I don't know how you would deny even that, but I do take your point. I wanted to admit, look, so it's
Well,
not
so
about
so my argument was that it's equally as extraordinary as any other cloth from time period, essentially, or any other cloth that's gone through a long history that has lots of stuff that's happened to it. They're all going to be extraordinary. They're all going to have very specific properties that are going to be extremely hard to replicate, just like any painting.
but
Any painting is going to be extremely hard to replicate everything that went through it. Like,
yeah, I
uh,
was just about to admit that.
all
So,
right,
so in the first place, though, that's wrong. So every the shroud is totally unique in term, and I'm talking about unique in its broad features, not just oh well, look, this one has a little nick here, this cloth doesn't, so they're unique. It's I'm not talking about that, obviously, right? But I'm talking about in terms of their broad, essential physical and chemical features that are relevant to mechanisms. Those are unduplicated. There is no cloth that has these features or anything like them, and doesn't come close. And there have been scientists that have calculated for the varying parameters, like Eugenia Natowski. She went to Jerusalem, did field experiments, and tested various parameters and stuff like that. So there have been lab and field experiments to try and take into account all of these various features. We don't know the full historical provenance of the shroud and where there are some gaps in its history, so we can't account for every feature. But in terms of image superficiality, it doesn't matter. There are no other images on shrouds, burial shrouds, or any cloth that has images that are superficial in that way. It's theoretically impossible if you posit painting or dry powder, some artistic method like that, for to recreate superficial images. It doesn't matter what we don't know about the shroud's, you know, history in 1204 to 1355 or something like that, or those don't matter. It's that broad feature rules out all of these things, and on that basis, that's a significant uniqueness, I think.
right, yeah, I definitely talking with the expert guy who you're going to have on your show would probably be better here. But yeah, I'm going to assume there's probably nothing unique about it at all. It's just essentially the same as any other old piece of cloth. I don't see any reason to think that this is special. Of course, I don't know enough about the field to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that would be the consensus in the field. But you can, when are you having what's his name on, and you can tell people.
Yeah, I'm having Hugh Ferry. He's, in my opinion, he's the best, most knowledgeable shroud skeptic that's out there. He does a great job. He's going to be debating Dr. Cheryl White, specifically on the historical evidence for the dating of the shroud. Yeah, he's been on the show before. He knows the carbon 14 experts and that sort of thing. He's going to help me hook me up with a carbon 14 scientist to come on my show, and we're going to debate that. So yeah, if your audience wants to check that out, it's up to them.
Sure. And now you want to tell them where they can find your YouTube channel and stuff?
Sure. So yeah, so my blog is at realseekerministries.wordpress.com. I include scholarly sources on a lot of my subjects on both sides. I try to be fair and let people make up their own minds. Otherwise, you can find me on YouTube, just Real Seekers. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tom. I really appreciated this.
Yeah, it was fun talking to you. You're a pleasant guy. Check out his Real Seekers channel. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And I will talk to you later.
Sounds good. Take care.
See ya.
All right. We're still recording?
I'm gonna do like post screen announcements and stuff, so we're still online. You can just leave whenever you want, though. By the way,
Okay.
I can hear the clicking. I don't know if that just in case other people.
Clicking? There's nothing clicking on my end. I don't know.
It's like I think when you're scrolling down on your notes or something, like clicking on your touchpad.
Oh, I might be like jiggling the laptop. So yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize that.
It's not
All
too
right.
bad. Don't worry about it. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. Talk to you later.
All right. Take care, man. How do I leave? Okay.
Yes, that is how. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you stopping by. Buffering shouldn't be buffering, Trillion. Thank you, Andres. Great talk. Check out the YouTube, the merch. Ow. TJump merch. All right. Give me like here. TJump merch. No. And TJump cups. Check it. TJump cups. Cups. So how are you guys doing? I don't really have much going on. I need a nap. Monogrammed recliners. Roby. Send me a request. I'll see if I can order them from Lazy Boy. Hey Amy, how's it going? I am depressed and lonely as always. No hot blondes. That is the typical day. Kevin wants to debate. I don't know who Kevin is. Yep, Qzopper one. That is correct. I totally agree. My justification for rejecting God claim is that it has no evidence. Yes, Lawson. I think I was asleep. Was I asleep? Fourth of July. No, I was at Murder Shed Steve's house. At his 4th of July party. Okay, Kevin. Post something in like my business email is on the about section. You can send me an email there, or post on the Discord so I can contact you, like to set up a date or whatever. Poker man. All right, guys, I'm gonna go get some food and probably exercise because yeah, somebody in the Twitch chat said I was getting fat, and like he's correct. I'm getting fat. I need to lose some weight. All right, Kevin, send me tag me in something on Discord to set something up. All right, guys, I'll see you later. I need to go to sleep now after I exercise or something. Hey, Mike, what's up? Thank you, CVA. Appreciate it.